Something Special by Tyler Fontaine.
Audio recorded by Tyler Fontaine and Jade Blair.
I forgot to dedicate this book to anyone, but oh well. Prologue. Brantham Ironfoot. He was falling, arms thrown wide as if trying to snatch at the air. Everything moved in slow motion, the world gone weightless. A frail old mage in a flowing blue robe spiraled backward, his mouth twisted into a silent scream. His short white beard flapped around his face like some panicked bird, except for an identical but smaller white beard over the groin of his robe. His eyes locked onto mine, pleading for help, but no sound left his lips. I wanted to shout, to break the silence, but I couldn't speak. He kept falling, hands grasping at nothing. That second beard waggled mockingly, making me feel like I was glimpsing a cosmic joke I'd never been meant to see. I tried to jerk forward, to help him, but I seemed to have no corporeal form. My heart slammed against my chest. I jolted awake, sweat beading on my forehead. For a second I flailed in the darkness. Then I remembered who I was and where. A dwarven wizard named Brantham Ironfoot, lying on a threadbare bedroll. My eyes were still full of sleep sand as my gaze wandered around the half-collapsed storage shed. Dawn light trickled through a cracked wooden plank, illuminating dust mites that swirled around me like tiny stars. My black robes, edged in red trim, were tangled around my short, dark legs. I kicked them free, panting. Again? I muttered, voice dry. You old fool. Why that same damned dream? I rubbed my eyes and scratched my nethers, half expecting to find an extra beard sprouting somewhere. But I was alone. No second beard to be found, only the upper one. A donkey outside let out a low grunt, reminding me I wasn't quite alone. I'd convinced some poor farmer to sell me the donkey cheaply last month. It had proven useful for hauling a few minor illusions I'd tried to conjure. Synergy lubricated donkey tongues, specifically. The donkey wasn't too fond of me. I licked my lips, tasting the residue of night terrors. It was the third time I'd dreamed of that ancient mage in blue. I had no clue why. Maybe I was cursed with an odd brand of prophecy. Maybe I'd eaten moldy bread for dinner. Or maybe illusion magic had messed with my head more than I'd realized. In any case, dawn had arrived. My dream was done, and I had places to be. I stood up, rolling up my bedroll, my donkey tethered outside, snorting as if to say, "About time you woke up." Through the cracked shed door, I glimpsed the hazy sky tinted by the faintest gold, perfect for traveling. I had a short staff to gather, synergy lubricated donkey tongues to pack carefully, and a city to reach before nightfall. I've never been your typical dwarven anything. Most dwarves spend their time forging steel or digging up rare gems. They can live in clan holds with ornate architecture, proud beards, and ancient tales. Me? I used to live nowhere in particular, traveling from caravan to caravan, trying to peddle cheap illusions like conjuring ephemeral piglets for children's birthday parties. It was profitable only when the illusions worked. More often, I ended up making donkey illusions by accident, or granting a real donkey the power to mimic voices. Let me tell you, hearing your own donkey quote your deepest secrets is the stuff of nightmares. Maybe that's how I got these weird dreams. Eventually, I realized illusions alone weren't enough to pay the bills. I needed something bigger, flashier, more useful. That's when I stumbled upon an obscure dwarven spell. Chainbind. An old scroll I purchased off a traveling peddler described how dwarven generals once used it to quell riots. They'd conjure iron links that latched onto many rebels at once, forcing them to cooperate. The brilliance was in its speed. No need for weeks of chanting, just a precise incantation to slam wrist manacles on troublemakers. Problem was, Dwarves typically used it under strict ceremonial guidelines. Not me. I didn't have a ceremony or official dwarven approval. I had just enough scraps of knowledge to attempt a short ritual that might let me cast Chainbind any time. One rainy afternoon, halfway between a dying farm village and a suspiciously empty orchard, I tested it on a pair of local bullies who were terrorizing a traveling merchant. The synergy lubricated donkey tongues glowed. I whispered the dwarven words, and zap! Their wrists snapped together in neat iron cuffs. They screeched, "Ah!" demanded I undo it, but I told them to leave the merchant alone first. They tried to fight me, but any tension in the chain seemed to strengthen it, like the famed Casparian condom traps of lore. When the merchant safely fled, I left them. Freed them eventually, sure, but not before letting them stew in their predicament. It felt righteous almost. That's how I discovered my newfound and yet unmonetized ability to quell nonsense on the spot. Oh, old Brantham never claimed to be a hero. Sometimes I feel more like a grumpy caretaker of donkey illusions, but I like the thought of traveling, stepping into town, and if I choose, slapping iron manacles on anyone who stirred up trouble. Maybe I'd fix a bit of the chaos, maybe I'd earn enough coin or respect from grateful shopkeepers to guard or keep going. I wouldn't be much of a wizard if I didn't let things unfold as they should. We often walk our path without knowing which way is right, at least in our mind. But the heart knows, and it hasn't steered me wrong yet. So that's the short version of how I ended up on the outskirts of Riverbend. My donkey, who I've started calling Onyx, now stomps around, munching on half-dried grass at the city's edge. I brushed his flank, thinking back to the dream. That old mage's face twisted in silent panic. Maybe it was just stress. After all, I'd traveled hundreds of miles, heard rumors of monstrous crab folk in Riverbend sewers, and dealt with occasional bandits who called me that donkey illusion wizard. Then again, dwarven curses sometimes leak into your mind, shape your dreams. I had no clue if that was related. I only knew I felt a restless itch to find something bigger. I patted Onyx's muzzle. Calm yourself, friend. We'll eat better once we find an inn that doesn't reek of mold. He let out a grunt. That could have been agreement or scorn. Hard to say. I have not been able to learn any spells that allow me to speak with animals. Donning my rich satin black robes with red edging, I now tucked my goods in a small belt pouch. The donkey illusions were sealed in glass containers, each hiss lubricated with a pungent fluid. I uncorked them. I could enhance illusions or, more importantly, amplify certain incantations. I'd gotten proficient at it, but not perfect. My last fiasco had been in a roadside tavern where mid-cast my energy tongues fizzled, and I conjured half a donkey's head braying on the bar top. Well, that ended in me leaving early, with a bar of soap and a free bar of soap as hush payment, yes. Anyway, Riverbend was rumored to be rowdy in places. Maybe I could find a real cause to break up a brawl, chain a few menaces to each other, and keep traveling. Who knew? Wizards rarely roam around alone, although I'm far heartier than most. I like to think I was forging my own path. We arrived at Riverbend's southern gate by mid-morning. The donkey and I drew odd stares, me with my braided salt and pepper beard dyed faintly burgundy near the ends. Some of the more astute in the arcane among the townfolks may have even recognized the geometric red rune-scopes lightly inlaid upon my robe. My staff, a hand-carved piece of oak topped by a chunk of, yes, you guessed correctly, donkey-lubricated quartz, didn't help me look less eccentric. I paid no mind. I'd been stared at plenty. The gods didn't hassle me. They barely noticed as I passed through the gate. They seemed more interested in daydreaming. So I slipped into the city, navigating crooked cobblestone streets that reeked of fish and steam vents. Airships floated overhead, contraptions clanked alongside alleys, and people hawked goods in every accent imaginable. The donkey disliked the noise, braying nervously. I patted his flank, wishing again that my illusions let me talk donkey properly. But Illusions of donkey speech don't translate to actual donkey language. Don't ask how I know. As we passed a canal jammed with cargo barges, I heard a group of fishermen complain about sightings of something lurking near the sewage outflow. They argued about whether it was goat folk or crab folk. I perked up. Maybe worth investigating. If a monster popped out, I could attempt a new Orbison-laced incantation. But first my stomach growled. Food, a place to rest, that was key. I led Onyx through a few winding streets until I saw a sign swinging. The Loose Trout Inn and Tavern. A cartoon fish was painted mid-leap, the sign half chipped. Perfect. Taverns are hotbeds for trouble. I mean that in the best sense. If I was going to find a bar brawl to break up or rumors of local wrongdoing, this was the spot. Onyx would have to wait outside, though. Even I knew better than to bring a potential donkey fiasco into a busy tavern. So I parked him by the water, though, leaving him some feed. Behave, Onyx, I murmured. He rolled his eyes as if to say, you're the bigger fool here. Then I slung my staff over my shoulder, magical items rattling softly in my belt pouch. The dream from this morning flitted through my mind again. That old mage in blue, beard flapping. I gave my head a shake, determined not to let it rattle me. Inside, the Loose Trout was bigger than it looked, long tables lined with dwarves, orcs, half-elves, and humans, all chattering over large tankards of ale. A faint haze of frying onions floated more densely in the air, although it did seem to be a persistent city-wide stench. My nostrils twitched. This was definitely the place to find trouble. Chapter 1. The Art of Gathering. Edward Goth. I woke to the unmistakable sight of a male gnome's oversized green eyes staring right at me. Wide, watery, kind of like a startled fish. Gnarl, my closest friend and perennial disturbance, had rolled onto my pallet sometime after midnight. Now he was perched on an elbow, blinking at me as though I owed him a personal greeting the moment I opened my eyes. "Ed, you're up," he said in a gravelly tone. I rubbed the sleep from my own eyes, easing out from beneath the threadbare blanket we shared. "I'd be up sooner if you weren't sprawling across my bedroll." He shrugged, the collar of his coat slipping off one narrow shoulder. "A gnome must sprawl, Ed." A faint golden light pierced through gaps in the stone above us, illuminating the clutter we called home. Repurposed crates, broken and smashed furniture, half-burnt candles, and the sculptures I'd started and never quite finished. The distant and light rhythmic patter of wagon wheels and hooves on cobblestone was increasing off in the distance. Clearly the lunch rush was beginning. My mind quickly went to the new piece I'd been conceptualizing. Something with layers of twisted metal. If I could track down the right scraps, I might actually turn into work I admire, rather than just tolerate or sometimes disdain. Gnarl sat up, grumbling at a tear in his patchwork long coat sleeve. "Does Ed realize it's nearly midday? Gnarl can't miss lunch. Is the junk worth it?" "It will be." I stretched my back until my spine popped. "I've got this idea for a sculpture. Something with wagon wheels, maybe a battered sign or two. Just need the right pieces." He watched me rummage for my scavenging sack. "Gnarl thinks Ed is aiming too teeny tiny. Go big or go home." He flicked at the coat's frayed hem. "Though home is under a bridge, so maybe keep going big." I snorted, adjusting the worn strap on my sack. If I find what I need, I don't care how big it is. I just want to make something that feels right to me. Our hideout might be cramped, but there was plenty of room under that bridge for the cool junk we found. Gnarl nodded, his eyes flicked to one of my half-finished carvings in the corner. "Gnarl loves Ed's art." He meant it, and I appreciated that. But I'm not so sure I believed it. I stared at the carving, a wooden figure of a dancer I'd put aside last week. If they like it, fine, but mostly I just want to like what I create. Otherwise, what's the point? "Admirable." Gnarl sniffed and stood, slipping on his 6-inch lift boots, stolen off some gnomish noble scuffed at the toes. They filled Gnarl with an undeniable swagger, unmatched by any other 2-foot 11-inch tall gnome, besides the famed gnomish talent manager Hugo Boss. Even with those lifts, he barely reached my stomach, but he strutted like some sort of prince, a particularly fresh one, even. They clacked against the damp stone floor as he paced toward the archway. All right, Captain Artistic Integrity. Move. Gnarl need food. I stepped out from under the bridge, hooves echoing on slick cobblestone. Most minotaurs wear shoes on their hooves, but I prefer being unshod and shirtless. Not everyone gets it, but feeling the cobblestones under my hooves keeps me grounded, literally. Same goes for feeling the breeze on my chest hair, and back hair, and shoulder hair, and face hair. A breeze carried the aroma of fresh bread from somewhere in the winding lanes beyond. Squinting at the bright midday sun, I paused to make sure my small wooden figurine, a potential barter item, was still in my pocket. It was. Gnarl glanced back, his big eyes blinking impatiently. You're not abyssal chickening out on me, right? We do the junk thing, then we do the sweet rolls. Yes, we do. I hefted my sack. Sweet rolls if there are any left. Junk if there's anything worth grabbing. I'm ready. He gave me a satisfied nod. Good. Let's snag your scrap metal and keep an ear out for that rumored crabfolk trouble. Maybe they'll bring spices. I didn't bother with a reply. Instead, I looked out over the district we called home. Narrow streets, crooked stone buildings leaning on each other for support, laundry strung between second-story windows, a stray cat mewed at a passing cart, hoping for scraps. Beyond that, the city bustled with its usual clamor. Merchants, citizens, and, if the rumors were true, a few unwelcome crustaceans. It was messy, but it had a heartbeat I'd grown accustomed to. Our first stop was Old Griggle's Curios, a cramped shop reeking of mothballs and regret. I had to low. Few establishments are built to accommodate the size of your average adult minotaur. This place was famous for selling leftover oddities on the cheap and for the ropes that dangled from its rafters, which more than once my horns had snagged on those snaky lines. A bull in a china shop is bad enough, but a minotaur in an oddity store can be a disaster. Gnarl and I stepped inside, immediately assaulted by a musty blend of stale air and candle wax. He nearly disappeared behind shelves loaded with dusty contraptions. Shelves sagged under the weight of rusted trinkets, half-burnt scrolls, and battered contraptions no one had touched in years. You break it, you buy it, came Griggle's familiar lilting rasp from behind the counter. The old dwarf, part salesman, part opportunist, stroked his wiry beard and gave me a wary look. Griggle pulled at the straps of his lederhosen and wrinkled his nose. Something tells me he could stare down a copper dragon and spit on its foot, should the dragon offer him a bad deal on a trade. I noticed a metal sign against a crate. It read, Dragonfire, danger, no entry. Instantly my thoughts popped like kernels in hot oil, salt, buttery potential for my next sculpture. And I picked it up and turned it over in my hands. 5 coppers, Griggle said, shifting his considerable heft. Or trade me something interesting. I patted my pockets, ripped, stained, older than me probably. I found a half-finished carving. My wooden troll mid-whirl. Trade? He squinted, sniffed, shrugged. Fine, I'll take the sign. Anything else? That wagon wheel rim, I said, pointing to the busted circle of iron, and that chunk of colored glass. Griggle rubbed his chin. Fine, but you owe me another carving next time. Of course, Griggle had no clue I'd deceived him. I couldn't stand that wooden troll and was thrilled to have it left. So we shook on it. I stuffed the sign, wheel rim, and glass into my sack, pleased to have the raw materials I needed. Meanwhile, Gnarl was off in a corner, rummaging under a table of old placards, squeaking gears and tarnished doorknobs. He had a nose for trouble, bounding around with that half-crouched and conspiratorial stance. His snicker told me he'd found something good. I glanced over in time to see him holding a familiar, bold red and black placard. Shoplifters will be prosecuted. He wiggled his eyebrows at me, then at the door. Sure would be a shame if someone just took it. Before I could protest, he snatched the sign off its hook and darted for the exit. Hey! Griggle roared, slamming his gnarled hands on the counter. You gotta pay for that, you no good. But Gnarl was already out the door, cackling like a gremlin on payday, which sounds like this. Griggle turned his glare on me. That sign's not cheap, you jabroni. I had no coppers, no carvings left, and definitely no time for a lecture. I'll just, I sputtered. Then I bolted after Gnarl. I ducked my head so my horns wouldn't catch another rope, nearly tripping over a stack of dusty old pans. My hooves clattered on the cobblestones outside, the noise echoing through the narrow street. Gnarl, nimble as always, was a good 20 paces ahead. He waved the stolen sign like a triumphant banner. Free for me, Ed. Gnarl is the greatest. Gnarl can do anything. Two patrolling guards spotted us and took immediate interest. They wore heavy plate armor that rattled with each step. Lucky for us, they weren't the stealthy ranger type. Gnarl and I took off, weaving through a bustling market. Vendors barked at us, "Watch it!" But we were too busy trying not to get caught. A fruit vendor's cart loomed in my path, stacked high with durable fruits, the big, juicy kind with extra thick rinds. I tried vaulting over the cart for a shortcut. Bad idea. My hoof slipped, the cart tilted, and a wave of durable fruits crashed onto the cobblestones. Sorry, I yelled, pulling myself upright. One advantage of being part bull, I can shake off a tumble. The merchant's exasperated shout caught my ears, but I couldn't stop. Gnarl was still fleeing, and the guards had picked up speed. Up ahead, Gnarl waved once. See ya, Ed! Then veered into a narrow alley. Typical. He always has a knack for disappearing when things get dicey. I ducked behind a line of laundry, my horn snagging a bedsheet in the process. By the time I disentangled myself, the guards thundered past, none the wiser. I stood there, panting, and checked my sack for damage, as one should. The glass and wheel rim were intact. The sign was safe. Future Edward would have to do quite a bit of ear hustling to get back into Griggle's good graces, but it was worth it for my prizes. I hugged my battered Dragonfire danger sign. Gnarl was gone, but I couldn't help but respect his audacity. No wonder I've been stuck with that crazy green fella for longer than I can remember. As for the rest of my day, first, I'll get hammered. Then the sign can follow suit. I spent the rest of the afternoon drifting through side streets, rummaging through old crates and junk piles, managed to barter away a chunk of my sculpture for a few more interesting shards. This piece in my head was starting to come together, but by late afternoon my belly rumbled louder than a steam-powered Durgle-backed Grubuck. So, time to hoe around my favorite haunt, the Loose Trout Inn and Tavern. Cheap ale, decent stew, zero questions about tracked-in mud, tables that only get wiped down when somebody gets thrown onto them, orcs playing slappies out back, and packs of wild dogs wandering in to be fed food scraps. My kind of place. I took a deep breath before pushing open the tavern door. Warmth and noise spilled out. Laughter, clinking mugs, the sizzle of frying onions. And underneath that, I caught the faint hum of Lucas on his violin. You okay there? Asked a passing waitress, noticing the sweat on my brow. Long day, I said, stepping fully inside and letting the door swing shut. I scanned the crowd for a free seat, a few battered tables in the corner, an empty stool at the bar. My almond-colored fur was considerably darkened from the sweating, and it was a relief to be indoors. Also, if the run made me stinky, my scent would be completely obscured by the rich and musty, natural scents of my favorite tavern. Well, my day hadn't gone as planned. I'd lost a business contact, nearly got arrested, and spent my precious coin on who knows what. But I gained a sign, some glass, and a new spark of creativity. I settled into a seat and I soaked in that violin. I breathed in the tavern's warmth. No complaining for me. I've probably quit around a dozen jobs in as many fields over the last decade. Nope. I choose my life every day, and it's on my own terms. And not for a single moment would I call it boring. I rested my heavy sack carefully on the table, ignoring the curious stares from a couple of swarthy dwarves nearby. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. I have my scrap, I have my vision, and I have a head full of ideas. That's all I need.
Chapter 2. Hooves on Hardwood. Jesse Morgan. I arrived at Quill and Ledger just as the clockwork chimes outside finished their morning tune, 3 short clangs that felt like an alarm for anyone dragging hooves or feet or tails. In my case, it was hooves, 4 of them clicking on the scuffed wooden floor as I made my way to the clean and tidy cubicle. No picture frames in it, but plenty of flowers and plants to make the space more bearable. I immediately started stamping shipping forms, the small quills in my vest pocket rattling with every move of my bespeckled chestnut hindquarters. My short-sleeved tunic and simple vest are well worn and comfortable, thrifted like all of my clothes. They have extra room for my ink scrolls, and you wouldn't find even the most crass or careless centaur without a main brush. Jessie! The familiar call came from Maribel, my favorite human coworker, perched on the edge of her tall desk. She gave me a little wave with ink-stained fingers. "You're early again. Trouble sleepin'?" I brushed my short brown curls away from my eyes. They're overdue for a trim. I shrugged, letting out a short whinny I'd been holding in. The neighbors were noisy last night. Plus, the tank on my toilet is broken, so it slowly empties on the floor. That means I need to turn the knob thingy that allows water to refill the toilet tank, and if I forget, then the bathroom floor is covered in water when I wake up. She nodded sympathetically. "You ever think of moving? Your place sounds like a nightmare." I flicked my tail. Moving costs money, and Harrington doesn't pay me enough for a scenic stable. It was a half joke, half lament. I maneuvered around my desk, a custom-built surface tall enough for your average centaur, a good half-foot taller than most humans, but dwarfed by a typical orc. Poor orcs, they really get screwed when it comes to office supplies. It still felt cramped. My dreams are filled with a standing desk sitting in an open field, or at least on an airy balcony. Maribel hopped down, handing me a stack of scrolls. "City Council transcripts. I think they're trying to regulate the new steam lifts, and also some permit applications. Don't quote me." I eyed the top scroll, illegible scribbles and official seals. Fantastic. More bureaucratic babble. Before she could reply, Mr. Harrington stormed in, nose in the air, posture stiff as a gear rod. He dropped a wad of new documents onto my desk, rattling my inkwell. I managed not to whip my braided tail in annoyance. Somehow he always timed his entrances to kill any shred of positive vibe. "Miss Jessie Morgan," he barked while pulling on his black suspenders. "This shipping guild addendum needs a revised summary by noon. There's a conflict in the city's new steam lift regulations. Figure it out." I flipped through the pages, scanning half-smeared runes and half-baked official stamps. In less than 10 seconds, I spotted a glaring error in the cross-reference codes. Without a word, I plucked a blank parchment from my drawer, jotted down a quick correction, and matched it against the council transcripts Maribel had just given me. "There," I said, sliding the parchment back at him. "Tell them paragraph 17 conflicts with Ordinance 3C. They'll need a revised form, but this version should satisfy the final signature." Harrington's eyes narrowed as he skimmed my quick fix, but he gave no praise, just a curt nod before stalking off. Not that I needed his approval. I'd done this dance 100 times. I heard another bark of his little ruby-pinched-up reptilian face, but only heard it since he was sitting in his office and at his desk. "Miss Morgan, I need every city council transcript directive sorted, proofed, and filed by midday. No delays. Don't let your dawdling on minor service applications and permit requests get in the way." I forced a polite nod. "Yes, sir," knowing full well that those goddamn transcripts were meaningless and the service and permit requests actually help people, but I'll never have time for those now. I could use a good scream and stomp. He further shouted to Maribel, her eyebrows practically stabbing the air as she listened. "You too, Miss Maribel. Keep the chatter down or you'll be working after hours. Understood?" Maribel straightened. "Understood." His door slammed shut, sending a tremor through my desk. I let out a long sigh. "Another cheerful morning at Quill and Ledger," Maribel said under her breath, rolling her eyes. We got to work. The scratch of my quill felt oddly comforting. I'd splurged on high-end ink, and the way it moved on the parchment, so smooth and shiny, laying wet and drying before my eyes, it felt amazing. That lasted a blissful 2 minutes, though, yet was a dose of joy in the monotony. Each scroll detailed shipping routes, cargo manifests, or petty city regulations that might soon be outdated anyway. I tried focusing on the mechanical hum that drifted through the open window, An airship passing overhead, wooden rattlegear cabs rattling on the street, a distant merchant hawking marinated snail shells, 2 for 1. The city was so alive out there. In here, it felt like a waiting room. Maribel looked over at me, brow furrowed. Hey, you okay? You keep scowling at that parchment like it's another guy asking you how centaurs wipe their asses. I let out a dry laugh. I'm fine, just thinking. Dangerous pastime, she teased. Let me guess, you're bored senseless? I hesitated, then nodded. I cast a quick glance toward Harrington's office. No sign of movement. I want something else, a job that matters. A life that's bigger than shipping logs and complaining about my toilet. She offered a soft grin. Maybe you need a day off, or a change of scenery. I hear the Loose Trout has cheap ale and decent stew. I wrinkled my nose and explained that it was not my kind of place. Sure, it's a dive bar, but it's lively and you could use some life. Plus, it's noon and there aren't many other centaur-friendly bars in Midtown Riverbend. We shared a conspiratorial smile and returned to work. Hours slid by in a blur of inky stamps and curling parchment edges. Harrington emerged twice more, each time tossing more scrolls around like confetti at a joyless parade. By midday, my back ached from standing in one spot, and my tail kept flicking in annoyance. Maribel nudged me, jerking her chin at the clock on the far wall. Lunch? Yeah, sure, I whispered. But the moment I said it, Harrington's door swung open. Miss Morgan, he announced, voice dripping with impatience. These courier receipts need verification before the shipping guild rep arrives in an hour. Do it now. That's his job, for the record, not mine. He slammed another sheaf of papers onto my desk, making my ink pot wobble dangerously. Then, without waiting for a response, he marched back into his lair. Maribel mouthed, I'm sorry at me, eyes big and apologetic. I managed a weary shrug. Go, I'll catch up, I said, half meaning it. She gave a sympathetic nod and headed out, leaving me alone with a mountain of busy work. I pushed through another hour of mind-numbing text. By the time I looked up, my lunch window was gone. Feeling a prick of rebellion, I decided enough was enough. I scribbled a note, taking a short break, back soon, and pinned it to my desk. Exiting quill and ledger felt like a breaking out of a cage. The sun stung my eyes, and the mechanical hum of the street sounded suddenly thrilling. I clip-clopped over cobblestones, forging a path I hadn't taken before. The air smelled of fried onions, fresh bread, and the faint metallic tang of steam vents. I turned a corner, nearly bumping into a drunken dwarf who muttered something about damn smelly crab folk. The mention made me smirk. Riverbend rumors never failed to amuse. A few blocks later, I spotted a swinging sign, the Loose Trout Inn and Tavern, showing a goofy cartoon fish mid-leap. Why not? I adjusted the green vest I wore over my tunic. Maybe a noisy, lively place is exactly what I need. I pushed the door open, bracing for the unknown. The smell of beer and food washed over me, along with a chorus of laughter and clanking mugs. A half-elf fiddled with a violin near the hearth. Dwarves hollered at a card game. A dwarven wizard in black robes with red edges sat quietly eating some soup, and the bar bustled with orcs, humans, and everything in between. The place was packed to the rafters with clashing voices, clattering dishes. I paused, hooves half on the threshold, wondering if it was too late to back out. Harrington's little red kobold face floated in my mind, stern and scowling, itching to ream me out for leaving work early. Compared to him, rowdy dwarves and stale beer seemed downright charming. I searched around for Maribel, but clearly she hadn't arrived yet. Or she bailed without notice, as she and most in this city seemed to love doing. Excuse me, sorry, I mumbled, squeezing around a bickering group of orcs. One elbow knocked my flank, and my tail swished in reflex, nearly swiping a halfling carrying 3 mugs. Watch it, he yelped, managing not to spill. I stammered another apology. I aimed for a small gap by the bar, but a stumbling goblin with watery eyes and suspiciously tall boots cut me off. He wore a ragged patchwork duster that swished round his knees, as though he'd cobbled it together from discarded curtains and old dish rags. He clutched a wooden sign that read, Do not sit on fence, like it was a priceless artifact from a lost empire. Then, as if noticing me for the first time, he dropped the sign to wave. Hey there, hooves, he greeted, voice scratchy. Got a spare coin for a friend of art? Nars collecting found items. I raised an eyebrow. Sorry, no. He shrugged, snatched up his sign, and darted away towards a large, shirtless minotaur in the far corner. The minotaur frowned at him in exasperation. Clearly they knew each other. I saw the minotaur glance our way, curious but unruffled, and I realized just how big he was. He stood a good head taller than most folks here, broad across the shoulders, his almond brown fur sleek in the lamplight. Even from across the room, I noticed he had a lean, athletic build, corded muscle in his arms and substantial forearms. Two curved horns rose from either side of his head, not towering, but enough to make a statement. His face was surprisingly calm, like a craftsman too engrossed in his project to let chaos bother him. And for someone shirtless and bare-hooved in a crowded tavern, he looked more at home than half the patrons fully dressed. There was something about his posture, too, an easy confidence that said, I've seen worse. He arched an eyebrow at the fleeting goblin, then shot me a fleeting glance before turning back to rummage in his tattered burlap sack. I frowned at my own sudden urge to stare. He was a minotaur, after all, part bull, part man. I'm a centaur. We're not exactly near the same end of the stable, biologically speaking, but still, I couldn't deny some small flicker of interest, or at least curiosity, tugging at me. I shook it off and refocused on the rest of the tavern. After all, I was here to escape my life's monotony, not ogle random bullmen in the corner. Still, I couldn't help another quick peek at him before I forced my gaze away. Suddenly, the goblin pivoted, trying to slip behind me, but he tripped on a loose floorboard. His found item flew out of his hands, straight at my head. I ducked on instinct, which sent my upper body forward. My hooves slid on a beer-slick patch of wood, and the next thing I knew, I was crashing sideways, right into the minotaur. Oof, watch it, he rumbled. I slammed into his shoulder, stumbling over an empty stool. My front half landed half on the table, half on him, sending a half-finished mug flying. The mug clattered to the floor, spraying amber liquid. My face went hot. I'm sorry, I blurted, trying to pull back without tangling my legs further. His giant hand caught my forearm to steady me before I toppled completely. The way his almond-colored fur contrasted with my chestnut flanks was almost comical, like mismatched puzzle pieces colliding. All around us, the tavern roared in laughter. Apparently, we were the midday entertainment. The goblin, Gnarl, stood there blinking, sign in hand, not looking very apologetic. I caught him giving a cheeky little salute to Edward before he turned his attention elsewhere, like he'd found a new distraction to pursue. The minotaur exhaled hard, then looked down at me. Instead of anger, I saw mild amusement in his eyes. You okay? Fine, I muttered, cheeks still burning. I scrambled upright, nearly knocking his burlap sack, some battered metal signs sticking out, onto the floor. He grabbed the sack just in time. Thanks, he said, adjusting it next to his chair. I realized I was half standing in his personal space, front legs brushing against a stool. I backed up, trying not to topple anything else. I'm really sorry, I repeated, forcing a quick breath. The goblin sign, tripped. It's fine, he said calmly, nodding towards a vacant spot at the table. You want to sit? You look about ready to bolt. He had the coolest, most relaxed tone, like we weren't in a jam-packed tavern full of ratty orcs and who knows what else. I glanced around, noticing the entire tavern had moved onto its next spectacle, two dwarves hollering about rigged dice. My heart still hammered in my ears, though. A part of me wanted to run for the door. Another part said that if I leave right now, I'll never be able to forgive myself. I sank my forelegs onto the stool, trying to fold my half-equine body into a not-too-awkward position. He offered a calm and good-natured smile. Nice to meet you. His voice was low and easy, matching the casual way he sat there. Hi, I breathed out. And seriously, sorry for the tackle. This place is a little more wild than I'm used to. Understatement of the year, but at least he didn't seem to mind my accidental half-hug. He shrugged, picking up what was left of his foot-high ale, apparently a special at this drinkery. Happens. You okay, Jesse? I like how he says my name. I brushed my vest, noticing a streak of salsa verde? Or something else. I survived worse, my boss mostly. Guess I wasn't prepared for the loose trout's brand of chaos. Another wave of guilt hit me, remembering I was still on the clock, essentially. But If I stayed at the office one more minute, I might have lost my mind. Edward chuckled softly. Yeah, it's a mess. Good stew, though. At least you can eat peanuts and just throw the shells straight on the floor. I found this claim dubious, considering this was the only table with peanut shells scattered beneath it. I eyed his bag, seeing the edges of a battered sign. So, do you and the goblin always carry random junk around to cause accidental collisions? The half grin reappeared. Gnarl's a living, breathing collision. I just picked up scrap for my various reasons. This sign's got a future. He said it like he truly believed in some hidden potential. I'd never considered junk could be anything but, well, junk. Art, huh? He quickly had my full attention. What, like sculptures? He wobbled his head both up and down and side to side. Little this, little that. I snorted a laugh before I could stop myself. A little of this, a little of that, and a lot of bullshit non-answers. To my surprise, teasing him felt easy. A tremendous smile grew from his studious mouth. I don't want to talk about myself. I already know me. I don't know you. That makes you an interesting subject to me. Sure, I can talk about myself. I fiddled with my vest pocket, feeling the half-hidden inkwell. I'm a clerk, stamping forms all day in a cramped office. Part of me wondered why I was telling him anything. Maybe it was the thrill of talking to someone else outside my usual routine. Maybe it was how calm he seemed. So you're here for... I shrugged. I'm not really sure why I do anything anymore. My gaze flickered to the spot where Gnarl had vanished. Didn't expect a goblin projectile. He winked at me and said, He's a handsome bastard, and I better not hear you say a word otherwise. Then he glanced at my spilled mug. Let me buy you another drink. Sure. Just water, though. I would rather not go back to my cubicle-shaped slice of mediocrity while smelling like booze. Edward signaled a waitress, who arrived with a wary eye. Once she left to fetch the water, Edward turned back to me. So, what do you do? What are you good at? The question hit me harder than I expected, like no one ever really asked me that before. I felt a pang of longing for something. Freedom? A real adventure? I don't know if I'm particularly gifted at anything, I admitted, feeling my cheeks warm again. Usually, I'm a model employee, but I felt like I'd snap if I stayed at Quill and Ledger another second. I was a bit of a bard in my school days, but the only humor my coworkers appreciate is how much they hate their spouse or how much they love coffee. He gave a sympathetic snort. I know that vibe. I've quit more jobs than I can count. Freedom's worth more to me than steady pay. I tucked a short curl of hair behind my ear. Steady pay is comforting, but maybe too comforting. Even saying it out loud made me realize how little excitement existed in my day-to-day life. Was that why this messy minotaur and his weird goblin friend intrigued me so much? For a second, we just looked at each other. The crowd noise surged around us, but I felt unusually present, like I was awake after months of half-sleep walking. Then someone yelled, Get back here, you thieving rat! I spun to see Gnarl, and yep, the goon sprinting across the tavern with a coin pouch in hand, cackling. 3 barbarian orcs barreled after him, knocking over chairs, roaring threats. I braced myself for a quick exit. Nope, not my problem. But he leapt to his hooves with a big grin. Oh yeah, it's on. I blinked. Wait, you're helping him? The goblin who almost grunked me with a sign? He shrugged his shoulders and pushed his lower lip up like he was saying, What else is there to do? Without a word, he charged after the orcs, weaving between tables and shoving things out of his way with the ease of a trained cow catcher. Are you serious right now? I muttered. Then I surprised myself. I found my back half kicking into motion. I couldn't help but follow. Move! A bearded, tube-top-clad lady dwarf shouted, scrambling out of my path as I galloped into the fray. I nearly collided with the handsome hippie half-elf bard and his violin, but I swung wide, hooves sliding on spilled ale. My heart hammered in my chest. I hadn't decided if I was actually helping Gnarl or just getting dragged along by this handsome minotaur's enthusiasm. Up ahead, Gnarl ducked under the dwarf's magician table, then up and over the dwarf with such vigor that he ripped the magician's midline clothing rope, causing his belt of goods to spill across the floor and exposing the entire tavern to the sturdy and bare cheeks which rested beneath. Gnarl was howling and cackling. Gnarl hopes no werewolves are present. My attention was then brought to the orcs, who were now flinging chairs aside, knocking a hapless weed elf off his stool. The minotaur stepped in front of them, brandishing his battered sign like a shield. "Chill out, fellas. No need to break all the furniture," he announced in a tone reminiscent of gentle parenting techniques. "Out of my way, bull!" barked the biggest orc, swinging a fist. He ducked and delivered a well-aimed sign smack to the orc's face, the clang echoing through the tavern. A cheer went up from onlookers. Apparently midday brawls were prime entertainment for the unemployed and rowdy crowd. I skidded to a halt beside him, adrenaline thrumming. "We gotta get out of here," I hissed under my breath. I realized with a jolt that I was actually invested. Maybe I shouldn't be egging this on, but some part of me felt alive. He smirked, eyes dancing with that unstoppable energy. "Welcome my life." The orcs advanced again. One reached under a table, trying to grab Gnarl, who squeaked and scrambled out the other side, a coin pouch clutched to his chest. The minotaur let out a whoop, lunging to block the orc's path. A reckless surge filled my veins. I kicked a chair, aiming to trip another orc. It actually worked. He tumbled forward, smacking his head on the edge of the table. Some part of me was horrified, but the rest was weirdly thrilled. Holy crap, is this the start of my bad bitch era? Maribel would never believe this happened. The orc with the smashed nose staggered upright, snarling, "You'll pay for that, horse girl." He looked ready to lunge again. A sudden blast of greenish light cut him off. The entire tavern froze. An old dwarf in flowing robes stormed forward, staff raised. I recognized the faint glow of runic lines etched down its length, some sort of heavy-handed enforcement magic. He glared at the overturned tables, the broken chairs, and finally, at us. A hush felt like we'd trigger a final boss in a game we had no business playing. "Enough," the dark-skinned dwarf in black robes with red trim absolutely thundered as he spoke. "I won't stand for this anarchy. Tension is as tension does, pulls and pushes, below as above." He slammed his staff on the floor, and a surge of magic crackled out in every direction, zapping around wrists. I realized too late I was clutching the minotaur's arm, trying to steady him. My arm suddenly felt heavy. Clank. I glanced down to see an iron cuff locked around my forearm, attached by a thick chain to the minotaur's wrist. My jaw dropped. "What the—" I rattled the chain. We had maybe 2 feet of slack tops, and it felt more solid than steel. Nara peeked over the minotaur's shoulder and squeaked, "Huh, that's new." The dwarf jabbed his staff at us. "Chainbind. Enjoy making trouble now, or calm yourselves down. You're now bound by your own reckless impulses." I tried to protest. "We didn't—" My new companion gave an incredulous laugh, rattling the cuff. "Oh, come on, we were just—" But the dwarf stomped again, laughing thunderously, ignoring any further protests. The orcs grumbled, realizing they were equally stuck, chained in pairs of 2, with Gnarl attached to the biggest, meanest orc among them. Gnarl and the orc at least had similar taste in tattered rag attire. A chorus of angry cursing filled the room, accompanied by amused jeers from the onlookers. I struggled to free myself, but the cuff wouldn't budge. He tested his end too, and despite his earlier bravado, he didn't look thrilled. "Guess we're stuck." I wanted to scream at him for being so casual, but the chain forced us closer, and I don't have an easy time raising my voice. "Fine," I growled. "We'll fix this, but if I lose my job over this—" My cheeks flamed at the thought. We had no business fighting or causing a scene. No wonder the dwarf singled us out. "Nah, we got this. Worst case, we find that old dwarf or find some other mage to break the spell. In the meantime—" He spread his arms like, "Hey, no big deal." I realized with a jolt that both of us had kind of asked for this. We jumped in without thinking, and maybe we deserved that consequence. I stared at him, exasperated. Fantastic. I skipped work for 1 hour, and now I'm chained to a random dude. Gnarl sided up, coin pouch still in hand. "Gnarl apologizes for nothing. But hey, at least you two can get to know each other better." He was summarily dragged away like a sack of potatoes by his new chainmate. Then I looked at my chainmate. Is he gonna be okay? Gnarl can take care of himself. Those orcs aren't so bad. The bar was still buzzing. Some patrons whistled, calling out jokes about newlyweds and honeymoon chains. I couldn't stand the attention, but my jokes seemed practically giddy. "All right, let's get out of here," he said, tugging gently on the chain. "We can plan our next move somewhere else. By the way, my name is Edward Goth." I let out a long breath and grumbled, Jesse Morgan, lead the way.
Chapter 3 Shackled Shenanigans. Edward Goth. I stepped out of the Loose Trout Inn, blinking hard against the late afternoon sun that stabbed my eyes like tiny needles. Jessie stumbled after me, nearly tripping over the doorstep when the chain tugged her forward. The rattling metal reminded me of a blacksmith's shop. Loud, constant, impossible to ignore. "Where are we going?" she snapped, voice taut with irritation. "Nowhere fancy," I said, feeling sweat trickle down the back of my neck. "Always a good look, Edward. But I've got a lead on someone who might break this spell." Her tail flicked in a way that looked downright offended. "Please tell me they're not another dwarf with anger issues." I shrugged, trying to appear cooler than I felt. "No idea. Could be an elf with a gambling problem, or a gnome with trust issues." I kicked a stray pebble aside, ignoring a curious stare from a passing halfling. "That's half of Riverbend, anyway." Jessie blew out a breath, trotting faster than to match my stride. The clop of her hooves made a clipped echo along the cobblestones. "Terrific," she said. "So we're just going to roam the city like a pair of questionable newlyweds?" A snort escaped me. "Better than letting those orcs find us again, or your boss." She muttered something that sounded suspiciously like, "Hope that little lizard enjoys transcript annotation," which almost made me grin. Almost. Girls got more bite than I realized. We turned onto a busy street lined with rickety stalls. Vendors hawked sizzled skewers, polished gears, and even second-hand boots. The air smelled of roasted peppers, old sweat, and steam from a nearby vent. So we navigated the crowd. I was hyper-aware of the 2 feet of chain tethering me to a half-horse clerk. More than once we accidentally clotheslined someone who tried to cut between us. "Sorry," we blurted in unison when someone yelped in surprise. At one point, an old lady with a basket nearly lost her produce. She spat a curse, something about turning us into toads if we didn't watch it. "Friendly city," Jessie murmured, sarcasm dripping from her words. I couldn't help chuckling. "You'd be grumpy, too, if you saw 2 real clumps blocking your way." Her eyes flashed at the word clumps, but she didn't deny it. We kept on weaving past a slow-moving cart pulled by a sleepy donkey. A pair of scruffy kids pointed at us, whispering excitedly. I gave them a goofy little salute, and they giggled. "In here," I said, dragging Jessie into a cramped side street. The walls were close enough to scuff my horns if I wasn't careful. The odor of garlic and something rotten assaulted my nose. My stomach churned, reminding me I hadn't eaten since morning. Jessie wrinkled her nose. "Ugh, what's this?" "Shortcut." I hopped over a very suspicious-looking puddle. She had to do the same. "Trust me." She shot me a glare that bordered on lethal. "Trusting you is why I'm out here looking like a fool in public." I grinned because, honestly, I was enjoying the day more and more as it continued. "Hey, you're free to lead if you know a better route." Her mouth opened, probably to toss out another barb, but she snapped it shut, swishing her tightly braided tail in annoyance. Instead, she followed me past stacks of mildewed crates, one of which was leaking a foul liquid that dripped onto our path. Classic Riverbend, I thought. Always a little too wet and a little too smelly. Finally, we emerged into a small courtyard behind a row of crooked houses. A broken water pump dominated the center, and a skinny half-elf in a top hat lounged against it like he was posing for a shady advertisement. He eyed our chain with a slick grin, like he'd already guessed our predicament. "You sure about this?" Jessie whispered, eyes flicking nervously. She wasn't from around a neighborhood like this, and it was obvious. If she was here on her own, she'd attract trouble like flies to, well, you know. I gave her the best confident nod I could muster. "He can dispel curses or knows someone who does," I said, raising my voice. "Hey, Top Hat, got a moment?" The half-elf pushed off the pump and doffed his hat with a theatrical flourish. "Well, if it isn't my bovine baby brother. In too much of a rush to introduce me to this enchanting equine?" he said, his eyes lit up as if he was eyeing the cuff of my wrist. "You must have pissed off one hell of a mage." Jessie folded her arms, posture rigid. "Something like that? Can you fix it?" His grin shifted to a cheeky frown. Straight to business? What's the rush? It's unseemly. He looked upward and took a deep breath. I do know a guy, though, but he needs components that cost at least, probably 50 silver. Oh, that number made my stomach drop. I glanced at Jessie. She looked like she wanted to punch this guy in the mouth. 50 silver was cobblestone copping, and we both knew it. Also, we didn't have it. Top Hat has always been this way, though, since we were dirty kids and into our teen years train hopping. He's come far, and as frustrating as he was, I had to respect the man, even when he was being more of an asshat than a top hat. We can't afford that, she said flatly. The half-elf shrugged, the brim of his hat casting a smug shadow over his face. Then no dice, love. Best try your luck in the undermarket if you're feeling brave. They'll cut off your hand for free. My jaw tightened. Not that desperate yet. I gave him a curt nod, then turned to steer Jessie away. Top Hat looked us both up and down and half grinned, his hat obscuring his eyes. Look, Eddie, old chap, I'm an honest guy and want what's amenable for everyone. Come to me if you can get, 30 silver, since you're family. I shook my head. Sure thing, bud. Love you. It might have sounded flippant, but we did have history, though not necessarily the kind I wanted to dwell on. Top Hat looked like he really believed he was being a kind, generous, and benevolent guy. Jessie watched him warily, tail swishing. We turned to leave. I led Jessie away, and she quietly asked, Are you guys actually family? Yeah, we're family, of course, but we probably shouldn't have gone to him. Why not? Well, Top Hat's connected, but he always makes sure things go his way at whoever's expense it needs to be. Jessie seemed surprised. Well, what's wrong with that? I try not to be disappointed in people anymore. Ever notice how when someone tries to tell you who they are, it's like they're trying to convince you it's true and maybe convince themselves, and it's pretty much always exactly what they aren't? Since he said he was honest, I didn't respond. I didn't want to think about it any longer, but I could feel her eyes on me still. We headed back to the main thoroughfare, tension buzzing between us like an overworked gear. Jessie's tail whipped against my side, probably not intentionally, but it still stung. What now, wise guy? She snapped, hoofs clopping louder than ever. I know one more place, a relic shop near the industrial district. Owner dabbles in hex breaking. Maybe we can trade something. I patted my scavenging sack. The battered sign, some glass shards, and my foolish hopes and dreams. Before we could move another 50 paces, a sharp whistle cut through the air. I recognized it. Top Hat's signature call. The one he used to gather his old crew back in the day. My gut twisted. We pivoted to see him sauntering towards us, a faint contraption hissing under his coat as he walked. Eddie, Top Hat said with warmth. You sure you want to bounce so soon? Let's take a little detour. My place, it's just around the corner. Jessie snapped. We're kind of in a hurry, she said. We need this chain removed. Top Hat gave her a scrutinizing look, then turned to me. I might have a solution that costs a bit less than 50 silver. Depends on your willingness to do a tiny, small, itty-bitty favor. Or maybe you'd like to see my new establishment I've upgraded since we last spoke. I sighed. What is it you want exactly? Just follow me. We'll talk inside. House of Top Hats, some folks call it. Though that's mostly just a joke name. You'll see. He turned on his heel and led us down a cramped alley. The walls so close I could smell the mildew on damp brick. Jessie kept step behind me, Jane forcing us to move in near unison. At one point she stumbled on a loose cobblestone, and I braced her elbow instinctively. Thanks, she muttered. She gave me a quick, uncertain smile, then looked away. We were both exhausted. We reached an iron door set into what appeared to be a run-down warehouse. Top Hat produced a small mechanical key that clicked with an odd hiss. Steam vented from the doorframe, and the heavy metal barrier slid aside. He beckoned us in, stepping confidently into the darkness. The interior was anything but dark, though. As we crossed the threshold, A dizzying array of gas lamps and arc-powered fixtures bathed the space in shifting colors. Purples, greens, the occasional neon pink. The main floor stretched wide, lined with patched rugs and raised walkways. At the center sat a large circular bar made of overlapping gear pieces, each one rotating slowly under the glass countertop. Behind it, a halfling bartender polished metal chalices wearing a suspiciously enchanting bow tie. All around, patrons lounged at brass tables or reclined on mechanical love seats that whirred and adjusted whenever someone pressed a pedal. A stage on one side featured a dwarven quartet playing instruments rigged with steam valves, producing a rhythmic, jazzy melody that pulsed through the club. Overhead, a clank apparatus resembling an upside-down windmill rotated lazily, sending glimmers of colored light scattering across the walls. "Welcome," Top Hat said, voice dripping with theatrical pride. "My humble domain. It's a social hub for sure, but also a spot where the right folks can connect. You know how it is. Riverbend's underbelly always needed a place with class." Jesse stared, eyes wide. "This is not what I expected." The chain between us jingled as she shifted. I half expected the other patrons to gawp at the iron cuffs, but apparently they'd seen weirder. A few did glance our way, but no one panicked. Top Hat led us to a private alcove up a set of carpeted stairs and at the back end of the building to a curved booth with velvet seats. Everything smelled faintly of dragon's breath incense and machine oil. Jessie wrinkled her nose. I had to admit, it was more stylish and crowded than I expected. "Sit," Top Hat said, gesturing expansively. "I'll have a server bring you a cheese plate, on the house. Or maybe you'd prefer tea." The question sounded polite enough, but I could see the sly light in his eyes. He was in his element, presiding over his den of mechanical wonders and shady deals. "We're good," I said. "No time for drinks. We need to talk about the chain." He chuckled. "Suit yourself." He slid in across from us, crossing his legs. "Now, like I said, I can't personally break dwarven chain magic. No, it's not my skill set. But, I could call in a favor from the Thieves Guild's arcane experts. Maybe set you up with a specialized hex breaker. The fee is still steep, but if you do me a small service, I'll knock it down, or heck, even foot the bill." Jesse's tail flicked in agitation. "A small service? Sounds ominous." He shrugged, pulling his top hat off and placing it on the table, revealing slicked back hair parted with almost surgical precision. "Call it a retrieval job. There's an artifact locked away in one of the old city strong rooms, and the guild wants it, but we'd rather minimize official involvement. You help me out, I help you out." He gave me a long and steady look, as though attempting to telepathically remind me of the times we'd done jobs together back in our drifter days. She gave me a sidelong glance that screamed, "This is a bad idea," and I couldn't disagree. Breaking in somewhere, that's quite the step up from minor scuffles in taverns. Top Hat twirled a ring on his finger. "Actually, it might be a step down from tangling with orcs and getting chain-bound by an angry dwarf, but that's for you to decide." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "I run this place as a legitimate business, of course, but every good business has side deals. Mr. Avon trusts me for a reason, and that opens doors. The question is, do I trust you two enough to pass on the job?" "We're not exactly in prime condition for sneaking around," Jesse said, rattling the chain. Top Hat's grin returned, warmer now, like he was talking to cherished friends. "Eddie can do anything he puts his mind to. I've always admired that about him. He knows how to get things done, don't you, Eddie?" He spread his arms, showing off the fancy but simple red and black suit under his coat. "And you know me, Eddie. If I can't help you out, I will. Just gotta make sure I take care of myself, otherwise, how can I keep my life together?" Her eyes narrowed. "You must be joking." "I never joke about money. If you prefer, we can skip all that. Just pay the 50 silver, or do that, you have that in your pocket right now, right? Of course, yeah." Even as he said it, he reached across the table and gave my arm a few pats. I remember when he started doing that, too. We were train hopping teens, and Everybody, that's what they called us, the dirty kids. The arm pats were a fleeting sign of genuine affection beneath his mercurial exterior. I stared at the battered sign visible in my sack. 50 silver might as well have been 1,000 gold. Jesse clearly hated the idea of being roped into a criminal heist. A server, an orc with a leather smock and tinted goggles, stepped up and quietly placed 2 glasses of some pale pink brew on the table. The swirling steam suggested it was warm. Jesse eyed it suspiciously but said nothing. Try it or don't, Top Hat said, inclining his head. All the same to me, this is a party. It could be, at least, if you let it be a party. He let loose a big laugh. oh, oh, at least until the crab folk take over, am I right? According to the average idiot around here. We appreciate your offer, but we need some time to think. See if there's another solution, brother. Understandable. I'm not forcing your hand. That chain is. He gazed at it pointedly, then put on his hat again. Please, feel free to explore my club a bit if you like. Some find it quite enlightening. You know me. I like to show folks a good time, especially when they're my folks. Jessie shook her head. We'll pass. We have a relic shop to visit. Top Hat stood, giving us a faint bow. Then I won't keep you. But if you change your minds, you know where to find me. Or if that relic shop fails, you're welcome back here, day or night. Don't forget to mention my name at the door, though. Saves you the entrance fee. His grin flicked softer for a moment. Hey, take care of yourself, Eddie. I hate to see you hurting. I glanced around, noticing how many patrons wore discreet guild insignias or lapels on their belts, or on lapels or belts. This was definitely more than a simple bar. Tension knotted my stomach. I'd grown up around so much of this stuff, around the hustles, but seeing Top Hat as a full-blown boss, respected, even adored by some, it was jarring. All right, I said. Thanks for the hospitality. He tipped his hat, hugged me warmly, and said, Stay safe out there, Eddie. Then he stepped aside to let us pass and reached out his hand. And you, Miss Jessie, try not to let this beef boy become a permanent accessory. He winked at me and gently released her hand. We turned toward the exit, chain jingling with each step. Jesse's half-horse body maneuvered around a mechanical slot machine that clicked in word, dispensing small brass tokens to a gleeful halfling gambler. A swirl of conversation and jazz notes followed us all the way to the metal door. Pushing it open, we stepped back into the alley. The club door slid shut behind us with a pneumatic hiss, locking out the neon glow and mechanical lounge music. Jessie let out a breath she must have been holding. That was a lot to take in. Do you think we're making the right call, not working with Top Hat? I nodded and looked forward, leading her away from the building. I know better than to work for my brother again, at least if it can be avoided. I shrugged. We'll see how desperate we get. 50 silver might as well be the moon right now. Jessie grimaced. I feel like we've stepped into a world I never wanted to see. 1 hour away from my job and I'm making black market deals, chain curses, infiltration gigs. She paused, touching the cuff on her wrist. I guess I always suspected Riverbend had an underbelly, but living it firsthand. She hadn't let on that she was rattled, and considering her admissions, I couldn't help but be impressed by her toughness and composure in these unfamiliar circumstances. Overwhelming? She nodded. Yeah. I patted her bare shoulder and pulled her a bit towards me. Well, you did a good job. I'd never have guessed you felt that way. We emerged onto a busier street. The midday sun felt harsh after the club's dim neon, but I welcomed the sense of normalcy. Vendors walked out, hawking roasted nuts and metal trinkets, while a handful of gnomish street performers cranked a gear-driven organ. Jessie watched them for a moment, her tail flicking in subdued curiosity, before we pressed on. Her short brown locks were darkened and weighed down with sweat, but her green eyes glowed brightly in the late afternoon light. I'd like to have spent more time looking at her, but considering the circumstances, I'd rather not look like a creep. She sighed, tugging gently on the chain, so I slowed down to match her stride. So, relic shop near the industrial district, right? That's our next hope? Yup, I said, adjusting a battered sign in my sack. They dabble in hex breaking. Might even do a trade if we find something they want. Jessie gave me a weary half smile. Guess we'd better not mention Top Hat's infiltration plan to them. Definitely not. We walked in silence for a while, weaving around a dwarf pushing a cart of salvage. A drizzle began, pattering on the cobblestones, forming tiny rivulets around the edges of the street. Jessie's hooves splashed lightly in a shallow puddle, and I felt the chain go taut as she paused to stare at something. A small piece of paper stuck to the wet ground advertising House of Top Hats, live music and gears. She scoffed, flicking it aside, and kept moving. Not a fan? She shot me a look. I'd prefer not to get roped into a second criminal fiasco in one day. But thanks for trying. At least we have options. I nodded, leading her past a row of crooked metal fences. Sorry I dragged you to him in the first place. I was hoping he'd cut us a break, but I should have known better. She shrugged, adjusting her vest. At least now I understand more of your, social circle. Gnarl, Top Hat. Who's next? Some days I wonder myself. The industrial district's skyline loomed ahead. Massive chimneys venting steam, scaffolding crisscrossing battered rooftops. The relic shop was tucked near those clanging factories, if memory served. For now, we just trudged forward, each of us lost in thoughts about the day's chaos. It's nice having Jessie by my side. Some people feel like work, but not Jessie. It feels natural to chat with her or even to walk in silence. I kept glancing at her, noticing the tension in her shoulders. She'd glimpsed a side of Riverbend that most model employees never see. My world, or part of it anyway. I couldn't say I felt proud, but maybe I felt a strange relief that someone else understood it. Even if the change forced us together, I couldn't deny a tiny part of me felt less alone. She caught me staring and arched an eyebrow. What? Nothing, I said, moving my gaze away. Just checking if you're okay. She shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I'm still here, aren't I? Yeah, you are. We kept walking, and the drizzle turned into a steady shower, drenching us in cold droplets, but neither of us complained. We had bigger problems after all, and as the day wore on, we trudged forward, a tethered minotaur and centaur navigating a city that suddenly seemed both too large and far too small.
Chapter 4. The Half-Hexed Hassle. Jessie Morgan. I'll admit, when Edward mentioned this hex guy, I pictured some kindly old scholar, maybe a mild-mannered wizard with a dusty bookshelf and half-finished teapot. I don't know why I let myself be that optimistic. Clearly the gods were lining up to prove me wrong. Instead, we wound up at the dingiest shack in the entire industrial district, chains still clattering between us, the stink of belching smokestacks overhead. The place looked more like a rundown tinker's workshop than a magic shop. Scorched walls, broken furniture stacked on the curb, and a makeshift sign hammered to the door that read, Hex R Us, in chip green paint. The door itself had suspiciously violent dent near the knob, as though someone had tried busting it open with a battering ram. I stopped short. Edward, I murmured, do you really think this guy can get the job done? His almond fur bristled around his shoulders. He's not the friendliest, but I've helped him once or twice, he shrugged, shoulders tense. Centaurs might not be his favorite crowd, though. I snorted. I'll keep an open mind. He offered me a small, apologetic smile. You know, my old mentor used to quote brutal great Minotaur General Ike the Likeable, who said, the best decision is the right decision, the second best decision is the wrong decision, and the worst is no decision. Guess we're somewhere between the second best and worst here. Right. I'm not really bringing any ideas to the table. My horse half was tired of fitting through cramped doorways, and I tend to avoid shopkeepers to dodge suspicious stares. I took a deep breath, tail swishing. Let's do it. Maybe we'll get lucky. Fingers crossed. Edward reached for the handle, chain clanging, and pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelt of burnt hair and stale onions. A single arc lamp flickered overhead, casting a sickly glow across piles of mismatched junk. Shelves heaped with the half-labeled potions, cracked crystals, and a suspicious lump of wax lined the walls. A rickety staircase led up to a half floor above where ominous squeaks echoed with each footstep. Someone was up there, pacing around. As soon as we stepped in, a spindly figure materialized from behind a leaning cabinet. He stood about as tall as my withers, gaunt arms, covered in swirling tattoos that might have once been elaborate runes. His hair hung in greasy strands over a pitted face. The moment he spotted me, my centaur half specifically, his lips curled in what could only be described as disgust.
Well, well,
He sneered, voice rough as gravel.
Edward the Underbridge Minotaur slinking back in. Emotional support animals stay outside, so you can't both be in here at the same time.
My face went hot, but I swallowed the urge to snap back. Let him get his jabs in. We needed his help, unfortunately. Edward gave a forced grin. Good to see you too, Quillfade. The hex guy, Quillfade, grunted.
What's this nonsense about a chain? You get collared for petty theft or just bored with your stable?
I stared at the shelves, trying to focus on anything but the bile rising in my throat. A stable joke. How original. Edward shifted. He sounded calm, but I caught an underlying tension in his tone. Edward asked, Any chance you could lift it? Quillfade stepped closer, bony fingers prodding the manacle on Edward's wrist first, then mine. The contact sent a tiny shiver up my arm, part gross, part the faint tingle of whatever residue magic was in his tattoos.
Dwarf runes,
He muttered, peering at the faint inscription etched in the iron.
big time, huh?
He clucked his tongue, stepping back to rummage behind a tall stack of chipped amulets and frayed scrolls.
I can try, but obviously something so advanced won't come cheap.
His gaze slid to me, eyes lingering a little too long on my lower half.
Especially if I put up with distractions.
I felt Edward stiffen beside me. He turned, half blocking Quillfade's line of sight. Are you able to help us or not? Quillfade shrugged and waved an aged, dismissive hand at Edward.
We'll see. Let me dig out my dwarven lingual references. Might have something that can break the chain, might not.
He disappeared behind a precarious tower of dusty books. I noticed my fists were balled and shaking. No wonder I rarely ventured into these back alley shops. People around here either ignore me or fetishize me. Sometimes both. My parents tried to prepare me, but noticing it is also about survival. I took a moment to scope the rest of the cluttered storefront. This place was chaotic, like an old curiosity shop run by an unhinged magus. One corner displayed an entire, shifting, spherical wooden mechanical contraption that hissed steam and occasionally spat sparks, which seemed like a fire hazard. Another had a bookshelf filled with battered volumes that looked on the verge of self-combustion. In the center, a waist-high trunk flickered with faint runic lines. A place like this could make a girl dangerously curious. Edward nudged me lightly. You holding up okay? I forced a small smile. I'm doing great, although you still haven't told me exactly what you create. My gaze slid over the battered sign sticking out of his sack. Although, in the best-case scenario, we can just smack him in the face with that sign of yours. That'd be romantic. He snorted softly. You really are, sweetie. I'll make sure to add beating up racist geriatric magicians to the list of things Jessie likes. Well, you shouldn't be talking to any girl who isn't beating up racists of every flavor, I teased, feeling a bit of the tension ease. Just being practical. We might not have known each other that long, but there was a strange comfort in trading jabs with him. I looked up into those huge almond eyes and couldn't help but add, I feel like every guy I've dated has been dumber than me. Call it arrogance, but they were all idiots. The only one dumber was probably my father. Guess my mother was a bit of a mad genius. Gods, I don't know if I need more therapy or less. Edward chuckled. His hand brushed mine, and he leaned in so his face was closer to mine than it had ever been, close enough to hear him breathing. My heart hammered. It took a few brutal seconds for him to speak, then he whispered, More therapy, Jessie. The answer to your question is always more therapy. We both laughed so hard for a moment we didn't notice a loud crash from behind the books. Quillfade reappeared, cradling a battered ledger. He set it on the table that looked moments from collapse, flipping pages with a practiced sneer.
Now,
He began, glancing at Edward.
this chain is dwarven, Might need an equal or higher grade of runic dissolution. Could require dwarven relic dust or some high-level emotional cantrip. Maybe metaphorical emotive dissolution arc. His eyes darted to me. I assume you have the ability to pay for any of those?
My tail flicked. We don't have much coin. We were hoping for a trade or a discount. Great. I sounded like a beggar, and I despised that feeling. My hooves thumped on the ground in frustration. Quillfade let out a grating laugh and looked at Edward as if I was his property.
Oh, I bet you do. Maybe your fancy four-legged friend can pull a cart or do me some errands. She's built for manual labor, no?
Okay, that was enough. I straightened my back, letting my hooves clop a step closer. I'm built for a lot more than that. Now you can handle the curse or not. Because if not, we'll find someone else less busy insulting potential customers. Edward placed a cautious right hand on my arm, while his left hand rose up to chest level, tightly clenched. But he didn't tell me to cool it. Quillfade actually blinked, probably not expecting me to bite back. Then he gave a scornful shrug.
Suit yourself, horse lady, but I'm your best shot in this district.
He consulted a page full of cryptic runes, pursing his lips.
Says here there are a few options. A present bypass emotive key, or dwarven relic dust, a drop of each victim's blood, and a synergy crystal. That alone runs, at least 70 silver. But maybe I can do a partial meltdown for 40.
He snapped the ledger shut, eyes flicking between me and Edward.
Take it or leave it.
40, Edward repeated, voice tight. I felt the chain tug as he jabbed his pointer finger forward. 50 would have been robbery. Now, if you want 40 for a partial meltdown... Quillfade shrugged, turning away in disinterest.
Dwarf curses aren't a dime a dozen, big guy, and partial meltdown might not fully dissolve the chain. It could just degrade it. Then again, maybe it fuses your wrists to the iron. Hard to say. Magic's funny like that.
He gave a short, nasty laugh.
I heard a rumor of a dwarf chain vanishing on its own once. A couple of idiots just forgot they were cursed. But who has the patience for rumors? You want real results? You pay.
My stomach churned. I looked at Edward in fury and anguish. I whispered in a mile-a-minute rush, at least if people get cursed on the job, they get workers' compensation. Of course, I had to get cursed at a dingy bar. Maybe I could sue the loose trout, but they probably don't even have insurance. It'd take me a year to save this much silver. I'm screwed all because I want to be irresponsible. Serves me right. Edward forced a deep breath, then looked at me. I know it feels like we're toast. Take a second to... if you need to, and we'll figure something out. You're tough and smart. Combined, we can handle anything. I felt a surge of gratitude that Edward cared how I felt. Let's at least see if we can talk him down, I muttered, rolling my neck to ease the tension. I don't even have half that much in my savings, but maybe we can do a partial coin, partial trade. I have some scroll crafting experience. I might be able to copy a couple of spells for him. Quillfade overheard and sniffed derisively.
Scroll crafting? You, the clerk? Don't make me laugh.
Laugh all you want, I shot back. I spent half my life reading and sorting official transcripts. You'd be amazed at what I can copy or interpret if given the right materials. He studied me with a skeptical squint, his sagging face tattoos flickering faintly under the lamp.
If you really are that good, maybe I'll let you replicate a few spells from my personal library, but I need the real complicated stuff done right. Mess up the runes and it's worthless, or lethal.
I lifted my chin. Try me. I'm no amateur at scribbling official nonsense. Edward offered me a proud smile, which I tried to ignore so I wouldn't blush. Quillfade rolled his eyes.
Fine, let's see.
He rummaged through a battered crate beneath the table, flinging aside broken charms and half-empty vials, until he produced a thick roll of parchment. He slapped it down, letting me see the swirling script. It was... complicated. My pulse quickened.
Copy 3 of those, Quillfade said, tapping the page. Exactly. Don't skip a single accent or stroke. If you do, it might explode in your face.
Part of me felt a surge of excitement. This was a challenge I'd secretly craved, something more meaningful than stamping cargo manifests. Finally, I got to do something I actually studied. I took a careful step closer and a deep breath. Hand me a quill and some ink. Here, Edward murmured, rummaging in his sack. He produced one of my old clerk quills. I'd nearly forgotten I tucked it there when we escaped the tavern. Quillfade lifted an eyebrow at me as if insulted by my battered quill. I shot him a schoolteacher glare. I spread the parchment out on a relatively clear patch of table. The swirling script was all archaic runic forms. Definitely beyond typical city permits. For a moment, anxiety jolted through me, but I forced myself to breathe, channeling that bored clerk from the Quillen Ledger who hammered out shipping logs in her sleep. This time, the stakes were higher. I could do it. Slowly, I began copying the runes onto fresh parchment, stroke by stroke. My tail flicked each time I reached a complicated flourish, careful not to jostle the table. Edward hovered nearby, chain forcing him to half stand behind me. Quillfade paced around, occasionally muttering about lousy centaur posture and hope she doesn't smudge the lines with a hoof. I bit my tongue. No need to escalate. Focus. Minutes stretched on. My wrist cramped. The arc lamp overhead flickered. I drowned out the dusty smell and the hex guy's muttered insults, letting the flow of calligraphy fill my mind. Each swirl was like a puzzle, each accent a puzzle piece. At last I set down the quill, blowing gently on the final line. Quillfade snatched the parchment up before the ink was fully dry, scanning it with a critical eye. He scowled, then scowled harder, as though disappointed not to find any errors. Huh, he grunted. Not bad. I guess you're more than a stable hand. I forced a thin smile. So that's one scroll. I'll do the next two if you still want them. He tossed me a reluctant nod. I shot Edward a quick, triumphant look, feeling an odd surge of confidence. Maybe this cursed day could yield something positive. I dove back into the runes, ignoring Quillfade's presence behind me. By the time I finished the third scroll, my shoulders ached and my tail was pinned awkwardly against Edward's flank. He had tried to give me enough space, but the chain limited how far he could stand. Quillfade snatched up the completed work. After a tense moment, he gave a grudging sniff, tucking them away in a metal case. All right, these 3 are acceptable. He sounded like each word physically pained him. I can lower the cost of a partial meltdown to, let's say, 20 silver plus raw materials. He eyed us with undisguised greed. Got anything else to sweeten the deal? Or maybe found some fancy dwarven relic dust? Edward exhaled, disappointment thick in his voice. No, we don't have that kind of coin or relic dust, so partial meltdown is out. Quillfade shrugged. Your choice. The meltdown might not even work, so it's a gamble anyway. We can always do the full procedure for the same price we talked about, 50 silver, or more. I'm not a charity. Great, I muttered, eyes narrowing. So we're back where we started. He wagged a finger at me. I let you do your little scribble routine for free, horse lady. That's more courtesy than most get. If I were you, I'd go hustle up some coin and come back. Edward's jaw muscle bunched, then relaxed as he looked upward in a thoughtful posture. He took one step forward, proffering his hand as though for a handshake. Thanks for nothing, Quillfade. No hard feelings. The old mage cackled and reached out, but Edward whipped the back of his other hand across Quillfade's crinkled jaw in a lightning-fast motion. A crack rang out, and suddenly Quillfade was on the floor. A precarious stack of junk wobbled from the impact, but somehow didn't topple. I jerked back in shock, chain rattling. Part of me screamed, "Holy crap, Edward," but another part felt a twisted surge of satisfaction. Quillfade was a vile bigot. Edward seized my hand, pulling me towards the door. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. I'll call the guards on you for that, Quillfade shouted from the floor. Edward turned, voice shaky just a bit. If you want to see tomorrow, you won't dare utter our names or look this lady crosswise again. If you do, I'll come back and finish what I started. Resisting the urge to upend a shelf or two, I shoved the door open, stepping back into the pungent industrial air. We emerged onto a street lined with factories, acrid smoke wafting overhead. For a moment, we just stood there, letting the reality sink in. Edward rubbed the bridge of his nose. That was pointless. I'm sorry, Jessie. I let out a sharp sigh. Not your fault. You warned me he was a jerk. I kicked a loose rock with a hoof, frustration building in my chest. We're stuck, unless you've got a hidden chest of gold stashed under your bridge. He actually looked pained. I wish. The best I can offer is a few old carvings, random scrap. Might be worth a couple of silver. Not 50, or even 10. We started walking in uneasy silence, turning into a busier avenue. Workers bustled by, wiping soot from their faces. Clanging gear-driven taxi rattled past. My mind whirled with all the day's complications. After a block or two, Edward cleared his throat. That, scroll copying, you did an amazing job. Where'd you learn those runes? I shrugged. Quill and Ledger has me transcribing and referencing archaic documents sometimes. The city recycles old runic stamps or imports random scrolls. I picked up bits over the years. Had to, or else Mr. Harrington would chew me out. I managed a half laugh. Guess it's one perk to that job. He gave me a warm smile. You're talented, Jesse. If that jerk recognized it, you should too. Faint warmth glowed in my chest, but I shook it off with a bitter grin. Yeah, well, it still wasn't enough to fix the chain. He rumbled softly in agreement. Maybe we'll figure something else out. At least now we know a partial meltdown is risky, and we got a possible lead with his mention of an emotional presence bypassing, which I've never heard of. I snorted. Like I'm gonna sit around hoping magic spontaneously dissolves a dwarven chain, but I guess it's a hint. Maybe an omen that we need a different approach. I chewed my lip, ears flinting at the back of a hiss from steam from a nearby vent. Don't suppose you have any old friends who owe you big time? He grimaced. None who'd pay out more than a few silver, and we already visited the only hex guy I trust not to kill me on sight. His brow furrowed. We can keep hunting, or do something drastic like, well, we do have that old contact, my brother, Top Hat, but I'd rather not. The mention of Edward's half-elf brother made my stomach churn. I remembered the tight-lipped way Edward talked about him, but maybe that was our only shot. I tried not to let my dread show. We'll figure it out, I said, voice steadier than I felt. Somehow. As we passed another line of smokestacks, the afternoon sky dimmed under a new wave of soot. My tail flickered irritably, and my entire body was coated with the city grime. Not to mention the clank of the chain that refused to let us forget we were stuck together. But despite the swirling gloom and the sour taste left by Quilfade's insults, I caught myself noticing how Edward gently guided me away from a puddle of industrial sludge so I wouldn't slip. It was a small gesture, but it stirred a flicker of gratitude in my overworked mind. Maybe we were cursed, but we were cursed together. We turned down an empty side street, the clang and hiss of factories fading behind us. My shoulders ached from tension, my hopes felt heavy, but my head was clearer than it had been in a while. Maybe because I survived a nasty confrontation with the racist wizard and didn't lose my temper completely. Edward slowed, letting the chain slack so I could walk beside him rather than behind him. Jesse, he said, voice low. I'm sorry you had to see me act like that. That isn't who I want to be. I grew up around a lot of anger and violence, but that doesn't make it okay. I looked at Edward, though he had his face half turned away. It's okay to get angry sometimes, Edward. Just earlier today you were in a bar brawl over a stolen coin pouch. Why let this bug you? His voice was quieter. I'm not upset I smacked him. I'm upset that I let myself get angry. I don't like feeling out of control. Jesse, I don't want to be a bad guy. I placed my hand on his shoulder. It was warm, despite the rain. Edward, that guy was a racist, lying jerk. He deserved a good smack, and maybe more. And I haven't seen you do anything a bad guy would do. Nope, not a single red flag for Mr. Bull over here. I laughed, and he turned to look at me as we walked, a smile fighting its way out from an uncharacteristic scowl. Edward, do you think it's bad to get mad? Or that getting angry makes you the bad guy? I looked at his face as we walked, seeing if it might tell me anything he couldn't. He looked down at his feet and then straight ahead. I don't know. I guess I'm just used to seeing the angriest person in the room as the bad guy. But I know it doesn't have to be that way. I'd rather not act out of anger, though. I don't want it. He shoved his large, hairy hands deep into his pants pockets. His face told me a little. I grabbed his tricep as we walked over some stones, though I didn't need to be studied. It's okay to feel angry, Edward. We lapsed into silence, the city's distant hum filling the gaps. The silence didn't feel empty, though. I shook off the fleeting hope that Quilfade's half-baked remark about curses losing steam meant anything immediate. If we want this chain gone, we'll have to do something real. Another lead, another risk. Let's go, Edward said softly, pointing down the street. We can rest, and then see if any other hexbreakers are around. I'll keep my ear to the ground, unless you want to consider more drastic avenues. I nodded, ignoring the pang of worry at what drastic might entail. Sure, let's keep looking, and we can always go back to your beloved bridge for a break, right? He smiled slightly. You might like it under there. It's quiet, no rude hex magi. I let out a small breath, forcing my ears to relax. Even though the day felt like a dead end, we weren't giving up. If anything, I was more determined to break this chain properly. No meltdown needed. Maybe deep down, I even believe we'd unravel it on our own if we stuck together. Silly maybe, but after everything, a little foolish hope didn't hurt. Full speed ahead.
Chapter 5. Goblin Goofs. Krog the Orc. I like a good tavern brawl. It helps keep you sharp. In my experience, there really isn't a better way to keep the fish sharp and the kicks mean. Truth is, I'd barely paid attention to the scrawny, sharp-eared green nuisance at first. I was busy giving my orcish companions a signal. Last thing I wanted was the city guards sniffing around. We don't exactly have squeaky clean records. But sure enough, the brawl escalated. Some cackling dwarf wizard in black robes slammed his staff, and a surge of brackish light shot around the oniony tavern. Ugh. I felt a crackle of magic pinch my wrist. Now my forearm shackled by a long chain to that handsome, bug-eyed devil who introduced himself as Gnarl, while brandishing a coin purse. It looked suspiciously familiar. Now, in my line of work, small merc jobs or the occasional muscle for hire, it's usually better when people don't notice you, but sometimes it can't be helped. The goblin had briefly visited our table asking for coin. He insisted on calling me Mullet, which is better than using my real name, although it is inaccurate. See, I looked down to knee height and explained, "Listen, you bare-scalped muggin. This is not a mullet. It's the traditional northeast full orcish style that drapes forward in the back, keeps it out of my face, but gives my lovers something to grab hold of." That day I was running with two of my frequent companions. We'd gotten caught up in the tavern chaos after the goblin stole from some orcs. Our orcs. My orcs. I guess that made me the leader of this small band, though I never asked for that title. We'd cornered Gnarl, and then we were struck by that wizard's chainbind spell. Scar and Ponytail got free. Lucky them. Meanwhile, I ended up stuck with Gnarl. I ignored him at first, scanning the tavern for any quick fix. Maybe the dwarf wizard would remove it for a bribe, but the old jerk vanished into the smoke. The barkeep was definitely not going to help. My crew started cursing. The onlookers cheered for more violence, and I decided the easiest option was to drag the goblin outside. Gnarl didn't resist. Honestly, he seemed delighted. I knew why, though. Despite the chain disruption, whether it be sex, laughter, or a good fight, each one is better when shared with others, rather than alone. I closed my hand around the chain near his cuff and yanked, marching out the door with as much dignity as I could manage. A few folks shouted insults, but nobody blocked our path. Now, as we busted out the front door, with Gnarl sliding on his backside behind me, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a loose handful of lint-covered cream berries. "Hungry?" he chirped, rattling the chain. I ignored him as he then repeatedly asked, "Where to now, you thick slice of mean?" "Don't call me that," I muttered, glancing over my shoulder. Scar and Ponytail trailed behind, exchanging confused looks and a laugh or two. I jerked my chin at them. "We good?" Scar suppressed her laugh and grunted. Her entire face twitched like she was about to punch something. Ponytail spat on the cobblestones and crossed her arms. "So we just accept being chained up to weirdos?" I clenched my jaw. "We'll figure it out." Gnarl seemed to take that as an invitation. Trust Gnarl to lead the ways. I have keys to every door." "Oh, Krog. Nice. Very ungrockable sounding." He beamed up at me like we were old pals. "You can call me Gnarl, so long as you're calling me. Then Gnarl's happy." I had no interest in encouraging him, so I just huffed and started walking, chain dragging the goblin along. Scar and Ponytail followed on either side, bristling at passers-by. The leftover adrenaline from the bar fight still buzzed in my veins, but it was pretty easy to make myself stay calm. As my friends can attest, I believe the loudest one in a given area is usually the weakest, although this goblin might be the exception. We turned a corner and nearly collided with a pair of halfling merchants. They recoiled at the sight of my orcish presence, plus the chain on my wrist. One halfling opened his mouth like he might question us, but Ponytail stepped forward with a glare and he scurried away. That left us with the hustle and bustle of Riverbend's midday crowd, all swirling around us, too busy or intimidated to cause trouble. Gnarl gave the chain a playful jiggle. So, are we going to your place or mine? Scar snorted. Your place is in a hogfish belly, you thieving rat. Oh, come on, Gnarl said, not the least bit offended. Was that money supposed to go to an orphanage? He shrugged. An orc's an orc, yeah, big, tough, unstoppable. We're really not so different. Ponytail's lip curled. Say unstoppable again. See what happens. Krog, could we please throw him in a burlap sack or something? We'll see. Everyone can have a use, even this thing. Gnarl wriggled his eyebrows while holding out the word, He continued wriggling his eyebrows for a full 30 seconds, while maintaining unbroken eye contact with myself and the others. I'd say he had a lazy eye with both of them looking in opposite directions, but nothing about those eyes dancing beneath those brows could be described as lazy. I have to admit, I've always found a wonky eye and a few crooked teeth to be fiendishly disarming. But rule number 1 out here in these streets, never fall in love. I yanked the chain. Enough! Eventually, I spotted an old barber shop that some orcish acquaintances used as a makeshift hangout. Just an abandoned place we sometimes crashed in. My scowl deepened at the thought of letting Gnarl see it, but we needed somewhere quiet to figure out what to do about the chain. So I dragged him inside. Scar slammed the door shut. Scar loves slamming things. The door closed and blocked out the city noise, finally giving me space to think. The shop stank of mildew and old hair, but at least it was private. Ponytail dropped a chunk of broken furniture on the floor and set it up as a crude seat, while Scar rummaged around an old cabinet until she found a set of bone tiles. I took a seat on an old barber's chair where Scar turned over a cabinet for us to use as a long table, and a grin flashed across her scarred lips. Let's see how that green rat does at Krog's game, Scar said. Make it interesting. If he wins, he keeps that coin pouch. If he loses, she tapped the hilt of her dagger. Gnarl let out a full gasp. You want to bet on a game of skill? Gnarl is unstoppable in all things, you know. Tee. I stared at him. What's in the coin pouch anyway? He shrugged. Endless possibility, you hot heap of honey. The possibility is only limited once it's opened. I rolled my eyes. Fine, if that's how you want to do it. We set up around a crate, the 4 of us leaning in while Gnarl clutched his sign. Shoplifters will be prosecuted, under one arm for some reason. Scar handed me the bone tiles, and I started dealing them out with practiced efficiency. My old clan upbringing taught me how to keep a cool head in any gamble, though typically orcs prefer more direct tests of skill. Gnarl took his tiles, smirked, and then exclaimed, May the unstoppable among us, prevail. The game started, Ponytail's stony face revealing nothing. Scar licked her lips each time she drew, and Gnarl was all chatter, bragging about his luck, rattling the chain in my face every time he scored a good combo. A few moves in, though, I realized he was, well, decent at best, but not unstoppable. The final tile drop was me, Mullet. Krog. And I sealed the game with a tribal flourish. My sisters hooted and hollered in delight, while Gnarl's shoulders slumped. Oh, Gnarl is bested. My coin pouch is yours. I watched Scar snatch that pouch from him. Normally I'd have pocketed it myself, but I was more concerned with the next step, dealing with that chain. I studied Gnarl's wrist carefully. We should cut off his hand, I said. That's how we get rid of the chain. So soon? At least buy Gnarl dinner first. I furrowed my brow, ignoring him. My orcish upbringing had given me a straightforward approach to removing obstacles, but As I lifted my dagger to test the chain's strength, a commotion erupted outside the barbershop door. I looked outside, and while I couldn't tell the precise details, it seemed there were guards looking for any reason to harass locals. Ponytail swore, and Scar stamped her foot. We gotta keep a low profile. The guard raids are heating up. Gnarl perked up. Gnarl Unstoppable loves mayors. Gnarl is even friend of more than a handful of them. Maybe he can help with the chain. I gave him a flat look. You live under a bridge and steal coin pouches, and I'm supposed to believe you know the mayor? I nodded to Scar, and she pulled her dagger. Time to cut that arm off so we can get rid of your foolishness. Sure, Gnarl can prove it. What do you have to lose? He said, hitching his shoulders in a shrug. The mayor and Gnarl go way back. So far back, we're super close. Ponytail's eyes narrowed. He's lying. Gnarl's grin grew, and his full lips spread far across his ample face. Nuh-uh. The mayor and I have partied together often. He's promised Gnarl many a favor. Great times. He's a shameless drunkard and will accept drugs and potions of any kind, with little prodding. It's half the reason he keeps getting elected. If we just pop in, politely demand a solution, maybe we can avoid the choppy. Scar spat. Puh! Screw the mayor, your ridiculous lies. I weighed the options. The guard presence was intensifying. Rummaging around random blacksmith shops might land us in a bigger fight. No, we had no better plan either. At worst, we barge in on the mayor, scare him, see if there's any chance he's got resources to fix a dwarven chain curse, and if not, well, we can always fall back on more orcish solutions. Fine, let's move. Scar muttered curses but followed me out with Ponytail on her heels. Gnarl trotted along, forcibly tethered to me, although I couldn't help but feel I was the one stuck with him. The little heel is turning into more of a headache, and if this doesn't work out, then I'll wholesale his carcass to a shopkeep so he can be turned into fishing bait. The stench of the barbershop was rich with mildew, but that gave way to the city's smoky, oniony air again. I turned us towards City Hall. We made a strange procession, me, a beefed-out muscle mommy orc with sick style chained to a giggling gobby. I didn't know shoe lifts could be worn with such confidence. Ponytail and Scar flanked us, glaring at anyone who looked sideways. These ladies love glaring, and I love that about them. A few times Gnarl tried skipping or humming a jaunty tune, and with every note I was more tempted to kick 'em. City Hall was a tall building with sweeping gear-powered doors, the seat of all official nonsense in Riverbend. People lined up for permits, clerks bustled about, and a seafood scent densely filled the air. One grizzled and glizzied guard at the entrance opened his mouth to stop us, but Scar feigned reaching for her weapon, and he backed off, pretending not to notice us. We ascended wide stairs lined with mechanical sculptures, maybe some city founder's attempt at progress. As we ascended, I felt more foolish with each step. We're going to waste our time with this runt's foolish lies. There's no way he's telling the truth. On the second landing, I glimpsed a scrawny clerk who tried to ask for our appointment slip. Ponytail hissed at him, and he scampered away. At last, we reached the mayor's office, a thick, gear-bedecked wooden door that read Mayor Barnwell. No, Gnarl didn't bother knocking properly. He just pounded with his fist and shouted, "Knock, knock," and shoved the door open by swinging on the doorknob. The mayor jumped to his feet, nearly toppling an inkwell. He wore a nicely pressed tunic, sweat beading on his brow. The city's heat wave seemed dialed up to extreme levels, and even the mayor's office wasn't immune to nature's damp and soggy grasp. "Gnarl!" he squeaked, eyes darting between me and my orc companions. What, you can't barge in here." I noted the wide-eyed panic behind his spectacles. If Gnarl was telling the truth about them being pals, it sure didn't look that way. The mayor clutched a stack of papers to his chest like they were a shield. Ponytail stepped forward, giving him a once-over, and Scar prowled along the walls, checking for guards. Gnarl hopped up to the mayor's desk, chain dingling. "Greetings. We got a cursed chain situation here. You think you can help a little Unstoppable out?" The mayor sputtered. "Oh, damn it, Gnarl. You can't just barge into my office like this, demanding things. Besides, I'm a bureaucrat. What makes you think I am equipped to handle curses? That's not something I can handle, nor can my staff. I'm Gods, man. You and your beautiful, green, skilled, well-muscled, and fur-clad friends are just in trouble. I folded my arms. We came in for a fix. If you don't have one, I guess we'll be leaving. But Gnarl spotted something on the mayor's desk. Ooh, what's this? Neighborhood Council grant initiatives for large-scale art installations. My friend would love that. He reached for the documents. The mayor tried to snatch them away, but Gnarl hopped sideways, short legs surprisingly quick, yanking me with him. I growled, not loving being jerked around. Control yourself, big man. This mayor's soppy demeanor made it clear he was weak-willed and not so hard to believe a wily little goblin might have a few favors in the tank with him. He just cackled. Solutions abound even when imaginations aren't found. The mayor's voice rose in dismay. Put that down. That's official business. I noticed a small arcane pipe near the corner of the desk, swirling with leftover purple smoke. The mayor evidently tried to push it behind a ledger, but Scar was faster. Scar's almost always faster. She picked it up and raised it to her nose and inhaled. Immediately her eyes widened and she staggered back. What in the mayor's face was drained of color. That's not for give that back. Gnarl snagged it next, taking a puff. A big one. An acrid, pungent stench reached my nostrils. He coughed. Ooh! Then exhaled a cloud of swirling lavender smoke. Ooh, that's not half bad. Potent. The mayor lunged for it, but Ponytail body blocked him. Don't think so. I rolled my eyes. This was chaos. But while others crumble in chaos, those who embrace it are freed to act upon their will. Goblin, put that pop down before you burn this place. He smirked, cradling it protectively. But the mayor's a dear friend and he'd want to share, right? I couldn't help but let loose a supportive cackle. Gnarl has a way with people. Stop calling me your friend. We're buds at best, and you know it, Gnarl. He began patting his sweaty forehead with a handkerchief. You're going to get me fired. This is strictly contraband for official arcane medical usage. Sure, Gnarl said, voice dripping with a dew and honey-filled faux innocence. I felt my patience fraying. We're not here for smoke breaks. If you can't unbind us, do you know any dwarven specialists in town? The mayor stammered. Nobody. Dwarven curses require runic cleansing. We don't have that here. Go to the dwarven quarter. Scar snorted. We'd get thrown out on sight. We orcs aren't exactly welcome with dwarves. Ponytail approached the mayor, glaring. This was a waste. I was about to agree it's time to leave when Gnarl froze, eyes locked on a different stack of papers. Wait. Attack rumored on House of Top Hats. Holy huckster. The mayor attempted to snatch the paper away, but Gnarl hopped to the side again, yanking me. I snarled in annoyance, toppling and spilling several half-full inkwells with the chain. The mayor wrung his hands. That's hush-hush intelligence. The ballpark boys might stage an assault tonight. We can't confirm. Why do you care? Gnarl has no time for your foolhardy giddishness, you dotard. More important things are at hand. Now return to your foolish pursuits, and remember you owe Gnarl a drink next time we party together. I was tense. My instincts told me a big fight was brewing, and I do like a good fight. Also, the chain was still on me. If House of Top Hats is some Thieves Guild hangout, which I'm pretty sure it is, surely that half-elf who runs it, Top Hat, knows a good mage. I charged to the mayor's desk, dragging the gnome with me as I knocked over a lamp. Listen, you! Now for the finishing move. Since I had his attention, I shoved my pinky up his nose. You're an absolute truncheon, a fool. You owe this common bridge dweller plenty of favors, and you'd be wise to answer in truth when we ask you questions. Gnarl giggled. Woo, here we go. I shoved my other pinky into the mayor's nostril. Yes, Gnarl demands you send the watch to protect the club. I had to respect his consistency. Gnarl has no problem knowing what he wants and asking for it. He gulped. But what can I do? Our resources are stretched at the city. We're focused on the dwarven lift fiasco and those ridiculous rumors of clawed crustacean dalliances. Scar spat on the floor. Wanting to show my support, I too spit on the floor. Then you're worthless to us. Before the mayor could retort, Gnarl scuttled under the desk, then climbed up the mayor's pant leg and up to his neck. The mayor was frozen in shock as Gnarl gently patted him on the cheek. Cheer up. We'll keep your pipe trick secret. It's good to have friends in low places, and Gnarl can't think of a lower place than elected office. The mayor, looking faint and dabbing his forehead with forehead sweat with his handkerchief, nodded desperately. Yes, just go, please. Keen to leave, I jerked the chain, and Gnarl hopped down from the desk, puffing one last swirl of purple smoke. Thanks for the hospitality. I was surprised the little dirge hadn't lied about knowing the mayor, but not half as much as I was surprised that he took a hit off that pipe and could still walk. We spilled into the hallway, ignoring the confused stares of passing clerks. Ponytail snickered, her eyes still watering from secondhand whiffs of that arcane smoke. Scar emerged in silence, face set. I was torn between frustration that this had all been pointless and a certain curiosity about the rumored assault on House of Top Hats. Once outside, we exhaled collectively. Gnarl fanned the chain in front of his face. So, Top Hat's face, yeah? Surely you have nowhere better to be. Scar grunted. We're not doing you any favors, Gobby. He wagged a finger. Oh, favor for Gnarl isn't going to the House of Top Hats. Plenty is to be gained by you following. Least of which is loot and favor among mighty folks. Ponytail mulled this over. Thieves' Guild? Yeah, could be of use. I ran my hand over my tusks, thinking deeply as if I hadn't already made up my mind. Orc culture taught me to pick a direction and move. Doubling back to some random blacksmith or dwarven quarter seemed no less risky. If House of Top Hats is a major criminal hub, they might, ironically, have more resources for a dwarven curse. And if a rival gang's attacking, we can offer muscle. We came to a large stone bridge, perhaps 50 feet up, and with the fastest murky currents in the city. I stopped and exhaled. We'll go, but if it's a trap or a bust, I'm cutting off the goblin's hand at the wrist. Understood? I couldn't let the little guy figure it out that I was starting to respect him a bit. So I yanked him by the chain to eye level. As he dangled limply from the arm, he looked at me with complete confidence and twitched unblinkingly while excitedly whispering, Gnarl isn't scared of you, Krog. And perhaps Krog should be careful about discounting Gnarl's reach. Gnarl has never yet found his reach to exceed his grasp. I blinked and smiled. Gnarl smiled so wide I could see all of his teeth, far more than most humanoids. I then thrust my arm to the right to throw him over the side of the bridge as he grunted, Whoa! Ah! As the chain prevented him from falling to the waters below. He looked up at me and regained his composure while shouting over the currents. The view is fantastic down here, although it would be even better if Craggy Mullet gave me a little smile. The bastard then winked at me, charm and hitch. I threw him over my shoulder and he smacked into my back like with a thud. Gnarl gave a dramatic mock gasp. Krog, your threats sting, Gnarl, to the soul, but your wistful smile smooths it. Now turn that tusky scowl upside down for Gnarl. He reached into an inner pocket on his tiny trench coat and dangled a beautiful white silk coin pouch, nearly bursting with coin. I snatched it and Ponytail coughed while laughing. You little imp, you skeeved that from the mayor. I dropped Gnarl to the ground with a thud. Okay, Gnarl, you earned your keep for now. Gnarl skipped along and let out a tee-hee. We wove through River Bend's cramped back streets. The drizzle that had started earlier turned into a heavier shower, pattering on the crooked roofs above. Water trickled down my neck, and Gnarl tried hopping onto a crate to avoid puddles, but then I yanked him back whenever it kept moving. He grumbled, and I didn't care. Scar asked, What if we get there and they ignore us or try to kill us? We're orcs, remember? Then we handle it our way. A fight's a fight, and loot is loot. Ponytail's eyes narrowed. I want to confirm that rumor about an attack. If we show up and it's true, we use it to our advantage. Gnarl piped up. Doing the right thing is its own reward, my sweeties. Second in value only to gold, of course. Nobody answered him, though I did crack a smile. Soon we reached the neon-lit facade of Top Hats, a battered warehouse turned club. Multicolored gears clanked overhead, shining beams of pink and purple into the street. A pair of bouncers, each wearing a stylized top hat, glowered at us from behind a mechanical gate. Their eyes zeroed in on the chain between me and Gnarl. Gnarl cackled. We're on the list. Gnarl's always on the list with at least a +3. One bouncer rolled his eyes. Get in line or get lost. Scar eyed them menacingly, and Pony's tail stepped forward, but I placed a hand on her shoulder. A little bit of orc sign language, meaning, don't start a fight yet. Then I faced the bouncers. We have urgent news for Top Hat. The second bouncer's gaze flicked between us. Go to the back of the line. Gnarl laughed. I wouldn't dare mess around. I shoved him aside gently. Let us in. If you block us and an attack happens, that's on your heads. Then there goes your seniority points in the guild, and even the union won't be able to help you then, fool. I made a gamble insulting them. The black-clad bouncers exchanged a glance, then grudgingly unlocked the gate. Fine, but if you cause trouble, we'll toss you back into the street. We stepped inside. A blast of honey-colored light and jazzy gear-driven music washed over us. A swirl of mechanical contraptions lined the walls, tables crowded with seedy types wearing gold insignias, and a rotating overhead fixture that spread shifting rays of white and honey and amber lights across the floor. Gnarl took a deep breath. Gnarl missed the hiss of steam and the breathing of living machines. Ponytail looked over and leaned in a performative casual motion against the well-muscled and slightly higher shoulder of Scar. Reeks of sweaty deals. Sweaty was an apt way to describe it. It seemed the city had gotten significantly warmer just on the walk over, and the heavy red carpet and rich tapestries on the walls didn't help once we were inside. We navigated between tables. I spotted various folks shooting us curious stares. A half-elf sipping neon blue cocktails, a dwarf with an odd crossbow propped against his chair, halfling bartender wiping glasses with a gear-laden bar, another mechanical slot machine word in the corner with a halfling greedling stuffing brass tokens into his bag. A hush fell as we approached a raised platform in the back, presumably Top Hat's private alcove. Velvet drapes parted, revealing a tall half-elf in an impeccable emerald and jade suit, with his top hat perched at an impossibly jaunty angle. He gave us a wolfish grin. Well, Earl always does bring odd bedfellows. Being surprising is the least unusual thing about him. Gnarl wagged his eyebrows for a full minute of unbroken eye contact with Top Hat as we all stood there in silence. At one point I attempted to talk, but Top Hat silently held up an open hand, signaling for me to hush. Finally, Gnarl finished wiggling his eyebrows and said, Top Hat, Gnarl brings good news with a capital G. Top Hat raised an eyebrow. If this is an official delegation, should we retreat to the den? I cleared my throat. There's no time. We heard a rumor about an attack tonight, possibly the ballpark boys. We came to get your thoughts and perhaps compensation for the info. His grin hardened at the edges. Funny, I got wind of that rumor myself. Although I'm guessing by we you mean our green pal here retrieved it. Why do you care? Also, Gnarl, if you steal from me or my patrons, you pay 10% in dues or I'll take your hands and turn them into hand shoes. He paused, looking at our shackles. Funny, those chains seem to be in fashion today. I gave a terse nod. Scar and Ponytail folded their arms, flanking me. We can offer muscle if a fight breaks out. Of course, once it's done, we will expect equitable compensation. Top Hat sighed dramatically while looking at his beautifully manicured fingernails, rather than up at me, as if to say I'm so boring that the dirt beneath his nails was more interesting. Well, sure, if you want to tangle with me, are you so brave? Gnarl hopped in place, practically yanking me, his voice raised in pitch and speed. Unstoppable we can be, and Gnarl looks forward to showering these fools in regret and leaving them soaked in the moisture of their inadequacy. I performatively rolled my eyes and lied. We're short on time. Do you want help or not? Top Hat studied us for a moment. I caught a flicker of worry in his eyes, quickly masked by a cavalier shrug. Stick around. Smart move on your part. I'm a mover. And if you're looking for connections, influence, power, whatever, then Top Hat's your one-stop shop. Stick with me and it's all yours. My shoulders relaxed a fraction and I kept my mouth shut. As my clan leader used to say, better to be presumed a fool than open your mouth and confirm the suspicion. He glanced up at me. If we survive the night, I'll see about your dwarven chain problem. And then some. Oh, yeah. I'll take good care of you. Don't you worry. Now enjoy your evening. I have work to do. It seemed Top Hat was full of lofty promises as he sauntered away, and we were quickly led from where we'd spoken to Top Hat. The brown and burgundy suit of our goblin server was easy to keep an eye on as she led us to a fine table in the back, wooden with beautiful infernal carvings inlaid in the aged darkwood. The server set down drinks we didn't request. Courtesy of Top Hat, along with anything else you'd like for the evening. Gnarl raised a tiny mug and a toast, craning his neck at a 90-degree angle to look straight up at me with his eyes alight, with a smile full of mischief, optimism, and a hint of hopefulness. Unstoppable, yeah? I snorted and put my hand on his head, palming his entire dome. Sure, I let the cold brew slide down my throat, savoring the fleeting calm, because if my instincts proved right, we were about to have one hell of a night. Gnarl unstoppable, he murmured happily, swirling the drink in his mug. Krog unstoppable too, yeah? I gave him a sidelong glance. Yeah, for now. Chapter 6. Gears, Grudges, and Goodbyes? Edward Goth's POV. Rain slants down across the soot-stained alley, gathering in shallow puddles at our feet. The days turn to dull gray with no hints of when dusk properly begins or ends. Jessie stands beside me beneath a battered overhang, arms folded against the chill. She's silent, but I can sense her frustration. We both know Quillfade's shop was a dead end, and that we've exhausted most of our leads on undoing the curse. Drops of water trickle from the edge of my horns, rolling along my soaked jaw. I wipe them away and I glance at Jessie. She meets my eye for a moment, then looks at the rain. I don't want you to have to go back to your brother on this, she says quietly. It feels like we'd be trading one problem for 10. I offer a small shrug. He does know people. The sort of people who deal with these things, too. What you need to understand about Top Hat is that he isn't actually dishonest. He means everything he says. He just also has a gift for believing whatever's most convenient, or having his moods shade his interpretations wildly. The winds of emotion fill my brother's sails so intensely, and they have carried him so far off course before. She rubbed my forearm. I used to think I was all above this shady business, but life's taken me on a real trip today. My dad's idea of security was so clear. A neat desk job, a steady income, and you retire without debt or trouble. That doesn't even feel achievable for me, even if I do everything right. Rainwater trickles across the cobblestones, reflecting on her faint scowl. Now I'm trampling that sense of order every time I chase another lead. It's like I'm turning into my mother. And what was she like? Jessie kicked slightly at a puddle. Always on the move, restless, brilliant, unpredictable, seldom settled in one place, never where I needed her. An amazing, bright, shining light that only shone on me when the stars aligned. So now you're here soaking in a back alley, chain-bound to a shirtless and unshod minotaur, biding your time because we can't get enough coin or luck for a real fix. And yet you're worried you're turning into your mom? That's a little trite, don't you think, Miss Morgan? She looked up at me with a startled laugh and a playful shove, then rested her head on my shoulder. It made me feel like I was wearing a suit of armor. Jessie, I think you can be whoever you want to be. I shift closer to put an arm around her shivering shoulders while trying to avoid a steady drip from the broken gutter. Today, it can be torment or treasure. What happens to us is often as much a gift or curse as we make it, and we're not done yet. A rattle of gears interrupts us. We look up and spot a brass-feathered bird perched on a bent drain pipe. It cocks its head, then drops a slim metallic tube that clatters to the ground before flapping off through the drizzle. Jessie exhales sharply. Your brother's handiwork? She asks, stooping to pick up the tube. A small crest shaped like a top hat gleams on the top of the cap. I pop it open and read the slip of parchment inside. Eddie and Miss Jessie. I'll be able to solve all your problems. Need you at House of Top Hats. Jessie stands there, rain dripping from the tip of her ear. He seems to appear just when we're done with him. I fold the paper. He's predictable that way. Our eyes meet, acknowledging this absurd, inevitable pull of his offers. If he needs my help, I need to provide it. But this isn't just my decision to make, so do we go to him tonight or keep sniffing around in the morning? Jessie exhales, tail flicking in agitation. We give him one more chance. If it's another scam, I'm walking away for good. I nod. The rain slows to a faint drizzle by the time we leave the alley. We wind through a maze of cramped back streets, our footsteps echoing on the wet cobblestones. Broken lanterns flicker overhead, casting jittery reflections in every puddle. Jessie clip-clops beside me, her hands shoved in the pockets of her vest. She's quiet, but it's clear she's deep in thought, likely weighing a dozen reasons to turn back. I remember how I used to feel, kind of like that on those old train hopping and cargo lifting nights with Top Hat. Half terrified, half thrilled, but never turning back once my mind was made up. In my experience, hesitation is far more dangerous than poor decisions. Far more. Soon we round a bend, and the familiar glow of House of Top Hats comes into view. Pulsing neon letters struggling against the gloom. It's less noisy outside than usual. I spot a lone bouncer leaning against the metal frame door. He eyes us with a detached suspicion, then steps aside without protest. I pause at the threshold, glancing at Jessie. She gives a single nod, lips pressed tight, and together we push into the wash of high-end mixers, mechanical steam, and swirling colored lights. We came upon them near the bar. The big orc woman with the severe mullet stands tall, broad-shouldered, under a battered leather vest. A beautiful pair of tusks jut past her lower lip, and a short, worn sword dangles from her belt. She's easily 5 times Gnarl's weight, maybe more. 2 fellow orcs hover behind her, one lean with a low-slung dagger and a single braid, the other thicker in the shoulders and marred by a ropey scar across her cheek. They keep to themselves, arms folded, eyes hard. Each has the calm posture of someone who I wouldn't want to make an enemy of. The chain clinks between the mullet orc's wrist and the scrawny goblin at her side. Gnarl. This isn't the first time I've seen him shackled to her, but it's still quite the sight. He tugs, trying to peer under a half-toppled stool as though expecting spilled coins or leftover scraps. The orc barely budges, rooting him in place with the flick of her arm. I cleared my throat while pointing to Gnarl and the orc's chain. So, newlyweds? Gnarl hears me and beams, green eyes going wide. Ed! He rattles the chain for effect. Gnarl's very, very lucky, Ed. Gnarl's chained to the meanest mountain of beautiful, womanly warrior in the whole city. The orc grunts and looks away. I suspect she was using faux displeasure to obscure her unfamiliarity with compliments. I noticed the handle of her sword shift under her hand, clearly a comfortable place for her to rest it. Top Hat rang. Gnarl waved for me to kneel so I could hear him better as he kept his voice low but excited. Didn't you think we'd meet soon? Or with me so gloriously secured? He tries a bow, but the orc's chain yanks him upright before he can finish. I give him a skeptical once-over. You rummaging under stools in a half-broken club? Didn't peg you for a lost copper gambler. Gnarl winks. Any copper under sad seats could unlock great treats. Ah? He shrugs at the orc, who tugs the chain a bit harder. This big beauty of an orc says Gnarl stay put, but does Gnarl listen? Usually not. The orc woman snarls something I don't catch. Jessie hears it and smirks, just a twitch at the edge of her mouth. Gnarl cackles under his breath. He fishes into his patchwork coat, each pocket stuffed with random nonsense. Finally, he pulls out what looks like a little sticky pouch knotted shut. Faint goo seeps out at the seams. He holds it out to Jesse, lowering his voice even further into a conspiratorial hush. Freed this from the crusty tavern chain-bind dwarf. Trash or treasure, it's all about perspective. Right, Ed? Jesse notices the damp patch of cloth distastefully, but she takes it. I can see some odd lumps through the pouch. What is it? Oozy lumps. Glowed a bit when first nabbed. Dwarf kept it locked up tight near his giblets. Jessie tucks it into her vest. Thanks, you little freak. Gnarl beams at this, and I can't help but smile. He's always been a good judge of character and an even better wingman. The ladies love Gnarl, and who can blame them? Krog growls a warning. Enough chatter. She glares in our direction, gripping the chain like a leash. Her two orc companions size us up, probably recalling Jesse's swift kicks from the tavern fiasco. Gnarl flaps a hand at them, then winks at us. Gnarl better attend my keeper's kindly wishes. Good luck up top. Bossman's jumpy over word of the ballpark boy brawl. I exchange a nod with Jesse. Take care of yourself. Love you, buddy. Gnarl salutes dramatically, though the orc woman practically drags him sideways. No worries. Gnarl has plot armor. The orc rolls her eyes. We push her out on toward the winding stairs, leaving them behind in their own brand of chaos. Jessie touches her vest pocket once, then meets my gaze with a guarded glint. We climb toward the second floor in silence. The hum of uneven lights and distant murmur of voices greet us. Whatever Top Hat's got waiting, we're going in armed with something. The staircase shows off old-world craftsmanship. Hand-carved banisters gleam with polished leaf patterns and faint gear motifs. Remnants of some earlier era that Top Hat painstakingly restored when he first claimed this place. Jesse walks beside me and gently whispers, Edward, what do you think? I feel her glance, and despite it all, a laugh escapes me. I wish someone would be foolish enough to mess with us. It'd make our day. I look at her gentle brown curls and her eyes and the cleft on her chin under her... What do they call them in the old tales? Poet's lips. Definitely poet's lips. Things are going to be just fine. I turn my gaze ahead, where we see the landing open into a broad lounge. My half-elf brother, Top Hat, stands by the rail. He's in a fine emerald waistcoat, gold buttons catching the lamplight, and that battered top hat cocked at an angle on his head. He's leaner than he used to be, or maybe just more rigid in posture. It was clear there's exhaust etched in the lines around his eyes. We used to be kids, thieving cargo off trains, scrawny and half-starved, but hungry in more ways than one. Now he looks like a man juggling 100 deals, each one ready to collapse at the drop of his hat. Two fiendish enforcers stand behind him, arms folded. These are hell-touched humans. They're clearly marked by their fiendish ancestry. This included curling horns, flicking tails, and glowing, fiery eyes. They tend to unsettle folks on first sight. These two tower over Top Hat, their horns curving back, tails swaying in board rhythm. They aren't uniformed, but they wear matching black coats, each bulging at the sides like they're armed. And powerful or not, well, Top Hat doesn't rely on raw force. His real hold is in the network of favors and illusions he's spun around Riverbend. He sees us and lifts a hand to wave the hell-touched aside. They retreat with barely a nod. Jesse and I exchange a glance, then approach. Top Hat adjusts his lapel, forcing a smile that falters around the edges. Eddie! Jesse! I appreciate you coming up. His voice has that smooth pitch I remember from back before it all, but there's an edge of exhausted tightness, too. I hope you're not just here to scold me. Jesse crosses her arms. You know why we're here, hot shot. He tilts his head, Top Hat dipping. I meant it. The mage is waiting. I can't foot the bill if the ballpark boys burn my operation or drive off my playing clientele, though. Something in his eyes flickers. The same near desperation I used to see when we scrambled for some stolen bread. He's got illusions, contacts, half the city's underworld at his disposal. He stands here, and we both know family's all you got in this world, and most people don't even have that. You've built quite the empire, brother. But illusions and favors aren't the same as safety. You can't trust half these people, right? Top Hat exhales and looks away. Sure, they're here because I pay, or I threaten, or they think they can milk me. Because everybody wants something. No, at the drop of a hat, they'd sell me out if the price was right. If we want to eat in this world, though, we must be willing to rip the steak out of somebody else's mouth. I'd say it to him, but I don't know if it would get through. But damn, I just want to shake my foolish brother and say he doesn't need to live life like this. No, but he knows it. Part of him, at least. And he chooses it every day. Just like we all choose our lot every day to some degree. Jesse hesitates, but I speak first. You need me here, so I'm here, brother. Always. Brothers. Always. He lifts his gaze to meet mine and steps forward. Then he embraces me with his rail-thin arms in a hug so tight, and I return the same. A rush of footsteps falls below, and a sharp crash breaks the moment. One of the hell-touched humans steps forward, a hand on his holstered blade. Boss, they're here. I count at least 8. Come on, he says, tipping his hat. Time to ride, my sweet darlings. We barely make it off the last stair when the main door slams, crashing against the walls with enough force to rattle the balustrade. The ballpark boys flood in, 9 or 10 of them, wearing tattered, mud-caked leathers, brandishing clubs wrapped in chains or jagged metal bars. One of them, a lanky type with a filthy bandana and a half-burned patch on his vest, spits on the floor. I catch the letters BPB soon in hasty red thread. A telltale sour reek, alcohol, stale sweat. It wafts across the club. An orc bouncer attempts to block their way, but a woman with a shaved scalp and a studded baton knocks him aside in a single vicious swing. He careens into a mechanical seat that hisses steam and topples over in a crash of gears. The overhead illusions flare like startled fireflies, painting the carnage in strobing pink and orange. Nearby, Jessie prepares herself. It's the same look she had when we first saw her fight in that tavern. Resolute, sharper now than I've ever seen. She doesn't need me to tell her to be careful. She's already scanning for incoming threats. The boys start shouting demands, money, protection fees, the usual extortion lines. But it's hard to hear specifics over the sudden uproar. I spot Krog on the other side of the bar, sword in hand, chain binding her gnarl, who clutches 2 daggers almost his own size. He's hopping from foot to foot, yelling nonsense like, hack and whack, Gnarl's on the attack, while Krog tries to jerk him behind a cover. 2 ballpark goons move in on them, only to beat Krog's blade in a brutal slash that sends one stumbling back with a streak of crimson across his ribs. Another thug hurls a half-lit bottle of something foul. It arcs overhead and sets a patch of the bar alight. Foam and steam erupt as Scar kicks over a bucket to douse the flames. Illusions overhead stutter, cycling from pink to blue in a frantic pulse. The entire place seems to quake with each impact. Chairs splinter, glass shatters, fist meet flesh. Jessie seizes a broken table leg, blocking a savage crowbar strike aimed at her flank. She counters with a swift low blow that sends the attacker crashing into the bar stools, howling in pain. I try to help her, but 2 more come straight at me. One with a chain coiled around his fist, the other wielding a crude torch. The stench of singed alcohol hits my nose. I swing a chunk of wood, maybe a stool leg, hard, catching the chain fighter in the shoulder. He reels, chain rattling. I kick the torch from the other's grasp before he can sling it across the floor, and he howls something incoherent. Ah! Tries to tackle me. I twist away, illusions flickering in the corner of my vision, bright pink spots searing my eyes. A roar comes from the far side. Krog drives the second attacker back while Gnarl slashes at the air, dagger spinning. Carve the scum, serve it for chum, he bellows, eyes wild. The mullet orc is no stranger to a fight, clearly, but the chain to Gnarl clearly holds her back. Despite that, she batters anyone who gets too close. When Ballpark Boy tries to feint, she catches him by the collar and headbutts him so hard he drops instantly, blood spraying across cracked floorboards. Jessie sidesteps a huge brute with face tattoos, hooking her table leg under his knees. He goes down like a felled tree, letting out a "Gah!" She locks eyes with me for a heartbeat, and I see that fierce spark. No hesitation, just raw courage. A battered illusion fixture overhead sputters out entirely, plunging half the room in gloom and darkness. Brief chaos follows. Somebody lobs a rag soaked in flaming spirits, and it nearly hits a patch of spilled liquor. Scar or ponytail, hard to tell in the half-light, knocks it off course, sending embers dancing across the shattered glass. Smoke mingles with the reek of iron and sweat, stinging in my throat. Finally, the ballpark boys begin to falter. A woman with a mohawk and a spiked baton tries rallying them, snarling about how Top Hat will pay double next time, but she sees her crew laid out, 4 or 5 of them groaning on the floor, others limp to the door, fresh bruises and busted lips marking their retreat. The orc bouncer smashes the last straggler in the gut with the butt of a spear, and that's enough to break their will. The mohawk woman spits on the ground. Puh! Shouts, "We ain't done!" and drags 2 unconscious buddies outside. The door slams shut behind them. I stand there panting, bits of shattered wood in my hand. Jessie wipes sweat off her brow, tossing aside the half-splintered table leg. My ears ring from the uproar, and steam hisses from an overturned mechanical seat. Illusions overhead flicker weakly in dark pink, leaving the room in an uneven, pulsing glow. Gnarl cackles. Still brandishing both daggers, though Krog yanks the chain so hard he nearly falls on his face. The orcs look battered but victorious. A hush ripples through what's left of the crowd. A hush that tastes of adrenaline and tension. Top Hat appears on the stairwell, crossbow in hand, eyes darting over the carnage. Broken chairs, scorched patches on the floor, illusion sputtering. Jessie breathes hard, pressing a hand to a forming bruise on her upper arm. I catch Top Hat's eye as he lets out a big sigh and a thunderous laugh. Ha 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 ha! You kept the place. They'll return eventually, but for tonight, we're safe. Jessie drops the piece of table with a thunk. So do we get our dwarven ritual, or should we expect another excuse? Top Hat exhales slowly, tipping his hat back to dab the sweat beading on his forehead. I know I promised you that dwarven cure, and I do appreciate what you did here, but after all this, I'm not sure I can get in touch with that mage anytime soon. He gestures dramatically at all the wreckage in the room. He's surely going to go silent on me, or until the heat dies down at least. It could be weeks before he resurfaces. Jessie's knuckles tighten around the chain at her wrist. Weeks? She echoes. You told us it'd be tomorrow. You swore. He grimaces, turning to me, then back to Jessie. I thought it would be tomorrow. I can't control the entire world. The cost of repairs alone. Illusions need recharging, enforcers want hazard pay. I have to line the right pockets so the city guard doesn't shut me down, and coin doesn't fall out of the sky, and influence requires knowing where and when to apply pressure. Honestly, I might have unintentionally oversold my connection with someone who could help. That happens. I feel a twist of anger. We nearly died for you. You said you already had the dwarven fix lined up. He locks onto me with a pained stare. I do the best I can. I'm not perfect. I needed you, brother. And you pulled me through this one, sure, but I'm stretched thin. I can't ruin myself to solve your chain problem. Jessie steps forward, eyes blazing. What are we supposed to do in the meantime? Stay chained together for weeks because you can't keep a promise? It's not that I won't. I can't. I have bigger fires to put out first. The ballpark boys aren't done, and my illusions are half fried. My staff's rattled, I'm buried in debt. Everybody wants their pound of flesh from old Top Hat. Jessie's tail lashes, frustration rolling off her in waves. So you fed us another illusion, huh? Are we supposed to sit here with these manacles waiting for a mage you may never even find? You think it's easy? One day you want me to conjure dwarven fixes, the next you want me to protect you from bandits. How about some gratitude that you're still breathing? My chest tightens. This is my fault, and I just want to walk away. Jesse shouts, "Don't turn this on us. We did our part." Ha ha ha. I did what I had to do. You can either wait or figure something out yourselves. I've got illusions to salvage, bribes to pay, and at the drop of a hat, any so-called friend might stab me in the back. You want me bankrupt, no illusions left, no coin for dwarves, because that's where this is headed. My heart pounds in my ears at his words. Jesse tenses, breath catching. You never intended to fix our chain, did you? He rounds on her, face twisted in fury. Don't you dare question my intentions. You have no clue what I've sacrificed, and Eddie knows. I was there for him more than anyone on the streets. He and I starved on trains together. We were all we had, and we did amazing. I don't owe anyone. People owe me. People owe Top Hat. This place, these illusions, my entire empire. I built this from nothing. Nobody else. And now you want to tear it all down just to get free, just to free your wrists? That's not what he jabs a finger toward me. You said you'd be loyal, Eddie. Yet here I stand, illusions crumbling, forced to pay out for you two. Wasn't that enough? Didn't I give you a roof tonight? A dwarven lead at least? Or do you demand more? Who has been more generous with you? Now, and now you're the one just demanding your pound of flesh with the rest of the crowd. I don't feel strong in this moment. I want to walk away. I can't even think of a response. I want to run away. I feel Jesse's hand grab mine, and my eyes start to well up with tears. It's tougher to see through the tears, and suddenly I'm just a crying little beef boy, hating myself for crying so much. Jesse slams her fist into his jaw so fast he doesn't see it coming. His head snaps back, hat knocked to the carpet, blood beads at his lip. For a stunned heartbeat, nobody breathes. You lied through your teeth to get us here. You used Edward. Don't you dare accuse him of anything. Top Hat's eyes blaze with hurt and fury. He grabs his hat from the floor, cursing under his breath. One of the hell-touched humans steps forward, horns gleaming, tail lashing, but he flicks his hand, halting them. You punched me. You deserved it, Jessie snaps, wiping her bruised knuckles on her vest. And you deserve a hell of a lot more. His chest heaves, illusions flickering above in sickly green. Fine. Readjust, he says, hisses, readjusting his hat with a trembling hand. I'm done. Leave. Don't come back. One hell-touched human steps forward into our path, horns silhouetted against the sputtering light. We tense. Another fight is the last thing we need. But Top Hat croaks. Let him go. The hell-touched human grudgingly moves aside, and Top Hat tilts his head to meet my gaze. I see regret flicker across his face, but then anger that grips him like a vice. He wants to say something, an apology, a farewell, a threat, but he can't, and neither can I. 'Cause we're just two broken kids again, both filled to the brim with self-hate and pain. Jesse grabs my hand, leading me away from him. And as we pass, he dabs the blood from his lip onto a finger and stares at it. Hat askew, illusions faltering overhead. The tension fills the air, but no one follows. We descend into the ravaged lounge. Gnarl stares wide-eyed from behind Krog, his daggers lowered as if he senses the final blow we dealt above. Orcs rummage through ruined chairs. The illusions sputter one last neon flash, then fizzle into dim half-light. Without looking back, we push through the broken front door, stepping out into the cold night. A brittle hush envelops us. No illusions, no false promises, just the drip of stale rain, the ache of fresh bruises, and the chain still locked around our wrists. Jessie exhales, eyes closed. For a moment, I can tell she's just wishing this entire day away. Let's go, I murmur. I notice Jessie and I are still holding hands. She nods, matching my pace, and we vanish into the darkened street, leaving Top Hat's world of illusions behind. He's chosen his path, and we've chosen ours.
Chapter 7. Into the Unknown. Jesse Morgan. The night air feels colder than it did an hour ago, as though the heat in Riverbend streets got sucked into that brawl. My legs ache, my wrist throbs from the chain metal's bite, and I'm sure I've got bruises forming on my side. Edward keeps close on my left, silent except for the clop of his hooves on the cobblestone. We've left Top Hat's club behind us, but the anger still lingers like a bruise on my heart. We walk half a block before I realize I'm still clutching a broken chunk of wood in my free hand. I blink at it, then toss it aside into the gutter. The fight drained away so much adrenaline, I almost don't know how to stand upright anymore. For once, I'm grateful for the chain connecting me to Edward. It keeps me from collapsing when my legs tremble. He notices the little wobble in my step. You all right? Not really, I admit, exhaling a shaky breath and surprise after everything that he's asking if I'm okay. I glance sideways, seeing the slump of Edward's shoulders, the tension in his jaw. I know it's not just the bruises. So how about you? I say, voice unsteady. He stops, turns so we stand face to face under a dim lantern. You did what I should have done sooner. I'm sorry I let him play you, drag us into his illusions. I should have known better. I swallowed, a knot forming in my throat. He's your brother, though. I can't blame you for wanting to believe him. His sigh is a soft, dry whisper of regret. I wanted to trust him. I always do. But he's so far gone, caught up in magic and deals that I can't pull him back from. That can't be easy to watch, I say as the words stick in my mouth. I rub my sore wrists, the chain glinting faintly under the lantern light. A jagged pain of resentment flares in my chest. We risked everything for nothing. I still feel terrible. I've never lost control like that. Never threw a punch at someone just out of anger. Edward set his hand gently on my shoulder. If anyone deserved it, it was him. I'm honestly relieved you stepped in. I was stuck, trying to protect everyone and failing. His voice hovers on that last word. I take a look at him, sweat still damp from his fur. We didn't fail, I say, trying to muster something like confidence. We survived. We stood up for ourselves. If that's what it takes, maybe it's worth it. He nods slowly. I'm glad you found that fire. Just don't let it burn you out. I used to be so angry and so sad all the time. It nearly killed me. I'm not used to feeling helpless or in need of rescue these days, Jesse. Never have actually been fond of it. My father's old warnings about never getting involved in other people's conflicts flit through my head. I used to obey every rule, never stepping out of line. Now I've flattened criminals and even clocked an underworld boss in the jaw. Strange how quickly life changes, but have I changed? I slowed down, which forced him to do the same. I turned to look straight up to him, took an extra step towards him, and placed my right hand on his cheek. Edward, sometimes you're the knight in shining armor, and sometimes you're the damsel in distress. It generally isn't up to you which one you get to be, but either way you deserve love. We shared a lingering smile, our gaze locking in a moment that felt both eternal and fleeting. My left hand crept up to cradle his face, my thumb tracing the curve of his cheek, while my left hand found him the firm warmth of his body, pulling him closer. Edward kisses me, gently, and in no rush at all as we both enjoy what felt entirely natural. Gods, nothing matches a good first kiss, and it's been a decade since I've had one that meant a damn thing. But here we are, and it's as magical as the chain bind. But we can't stay here forever. The second his lips leave mine, I already miss the warmth. He moves his mouth away from and takes a deep breath. He then puts a hand behind my head and tenderly leans forward, his forehead pressing against mine. A crash echoes from the next street over, wood splintering against stone. I stiffen, and Edward's head turns in the same direction. We exchange a look that says, now what? Rounding a corner, we spot a few ballpark boys from the fight, stumbling through the gloom. One's got a bandaged arm, another limps. They look over their shoulders, cursing about that damn minotaur when they catch sight of us. A moment of tense recognition passes. My grip tightens on Edward's arm. They bolt towards us. We manage to weave and duck down a narrow alley. The third, limping badly, trips over a small crate in the path. We rush around a corner, but a moment later we hear the clang of metal, a rush of foul, damp air. We skid to a halt and at a grated sewer entrance and hear the distance. "This way, fools! Capture them alive!" Water trickles from the opening, stinking of rot. Edward and I exchange a wary look. My heart slams against my ribs again, adrenaline pumping afresh. We're drained, battered, barely able to stand. We know that fighting isn't an option right now. Edward gestures for me to stand aside while he pries the grate open enough for us to fit through. My stomach churns at the reek. "Does this count as a first date?" I mutter. He manages a tired grin. "Guess we're not done making bad decisions tonight." I snort softly, hooking my arm around his. "Let's get it over with then." We duck into the darkness, sewer stench and dripping echoes enveloping us. Another fight might just be around the bend, but something in me says we can handle it. No more letting people walk all over me. The musk of onions was dense in the air. Now that we'd ducked below ground, I'd have taken a crowded tavern over this dripping tunnel in a heartbeat. We stood calf deep in murky water, squinting at a narrow passage up ahead. It was dim, some algae or fungus glowed faintly along the cracked walls, but it cast everything in a sickly green. "Do we have a plan, or are we just wandering until something eats us?" I asked, water sloshing around my hooves. My tail flicked, partly from nerves, mostly to avoid some questionable mold. Edward shrugged. "I trust my instincts." It was good to see Edward as himself again. Sometimes it seems like the surest way to rip someone's personal growth is just to have them spend some time with their family. I rolled my eyes, but had to be impressed. He bounces back quick. I waited after him, trying not to picture giant sewer gators or spider bats lurking around the corner. At least the space was somewhat navigable. The ceiling rose above us, covered in dripping stalactite growth that glistened in the brackish light. My vest stuck unpleasantly to my sides. Edward, bare chest and slicked with sweat, looked like he was on a jungle expedition, minus the actual jungle. We trudged on. Every so often the water gave way to patches of slick stone. I tried to focus on the small things, like the drip of moisture from overhead, the uneven echo of our steps, anything to ignore the claustrophobic feeling creeping up my spine. "Are you good?" he asked, glancing back. "Floor is suspiciously squishy." I lifted a hoof, grimacing at something that clung to the underside. "So yeah, I'm peachy." Edward snorted. "At least you're not bored. You wanted something different." He had me there. "Sure, who needs a walk in the countryside when you have the sewer? No wonder your best friend's a goblin. Why not ride a boat while we're down here and you can be the boat?" He slowed down a bit, letting me catch up. "I can do boat rides. I once lived on a barge for 2 weeks." I frowned. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. The captain offered me a bunk if I painted murals on the galley walls, so I did." He kicked the loose stone and watched it skip across the water. "Turns out I get seasick." Go figure. "So you just left?" He shrugged. "Hell no, I didn't. I stayed until we made port. Spent the last 2 days curled up with a bucket and a paintbrush." "Charming." I hopped over a bit of broken pipe. "Is that your thing then? Trying everything once, then moving on?" "I guess." He marched along. "I like not knowing what tomorrow looks like. I hope to never own a calendar again." I chewed on that for a second. Must be nice. I can't even decide if I want to keep renting the same crummy apartment with the same busted toilet tank, and yet I stay. Safe, familiar, depressing. Broken toilet tank. That is depressing. I paused, feeling the water swirl around my forelegs. I used to sing back in school. Thought I'd see the world, maybe join a traveling troupe. Then rent got high and I took a clerk job for the paycheck. 10 years later, I'm still there. Although, I guess all my bard friends are currently still sleeping on couches. I don't want that either. He nodded. Some people would rather sleep on futons than spend their life in a job they hate and sleeping in a bed next to a partner they can't stand and walking a pet possum they wish they could bring to the butcher. Is it weird I feel guilty for hating my situation? Like, I should be grateful I'm not starving. There's a lot of people out there starving. Edward stepped over a jagged rock, tucking me forward with the chain. "I don't think it's weird. I just think it sucks." I let out a dry laugh. "Right." We passed beneath the dripping stone arch. Water plopped onto my shoulder, making me flinch. Edward angled his body to shield my head from the next drip, then continued like it was nothing. I chuckled softly. "Chivalrous." "It's that or let you drown drop by drop." "Which would be a slow death. Thanks for sparing me." He stopped suddenly, looking at a small alcove in the wall, moldy wooden crates stacked haphazardly. It reminds me of this stockroom where I used to work. Warehouse gig, 2 days. Hated it. I raised an eyebrow. You only lasted 2 days? He turned to me. Boss told me the stacked crates of spice in a corner. I got distracted, started whittling at that job, on the clock, of course. Got fired, obviously. I did discover love of the contemplative art of whittling, so it was definitely worth the journey. I found myself strangely fascinated. Carving, huh? That's how you got into art? He shrugged. I've always made art, and I've always hated being told what to do. I think everybody probably makes art, though. They just don't always know it. I spotted a scuttling shadow near the crates. Probably a rat. I can hold down a job. I can handle it by nodding at my boss, stamping forms, and slowly dying inside. Yet here you are, he reminded me, continuing down the corridor. You snapped. I guess I did. Thankfully. I paused, stepping onto a patch of stone that felt less slimy. You ever have a plan? Like a 5-year plan? Or do you just float along? He let out a low sigh. I used to plan. I thought I could do anything. Stuff kept falling apart, so I learned to improvise. I do have goals, though. Oh, yeah? He hesitated, which surprised me. Usually he blurted out everything. I want to make something I love, something special and beautiful. Good art makes people feel things. If you tell me you're an artist and you don't care if people have strong emotional reactions to your art, then I'd laugh in your face. I've made some things I like, but I want to make things I love, and I want other people to feel less alone in this world when they see what I make. Art relieves suffering. It is the desperate plea of the soul of one being to be heard and seen and understood by others. I studied his face. Good answer. His gaze stopped gently on me, but didn't stay there long as he casually continued looking around the sewer. Most art struggles to make beautiful things beautiful. Great art shows how even the mundane is beautiful, the things we take for granted. I think masterpieces can even show the beauty in the horrible or painful parts of life, give us a sublime appreciation for those. If I could capture any of that and hold it and then share it with people, it'd be like finding an amazing treasure. Hopefully you'd let it go too. I fiddled with the fraying edge of my vest. He offered a half smile. We have more in common than I thought. I opened my mouth to reply, but a nearby splash snapped us back to reality. We both swung around, chain jerking. Some creature, maybe a rat, maybe something bigger, skittered behind a fallen column. You think it's gonna eat us? I breathed. Edward raised a battered sign strapped to his back. I wish a fool would. I'd eat that sucker like an asthmatic pug eating his favorite wet food. Despite everything, I laughed. He looked away, looking proud of himself. He motioned for me to keep moving, footsteps echoing through the dim corridor. Come on, your boss can't yell at you if we're lost down here forever. Nice motivational speech, I muttered, trying not to slip on a mossy slab. But something around the casual way he made it made me feel lighter. Like maybe we figured this out. All right, beef boy, lead the way. Nothing about our situation was less dire, but somehow the conversation helped. Maybe knowing Edward's random job history or big artistic dreams made this whole chain-binding fiasco feel slightly less random. Or maybe it was just nice not to be alone. Either way, we had a labyrinth to escape and a boss I might never return to. Not having a job would make life more difficult, but gods, I am finally admitting to myself that I hate walking into that job 5 days per week. I glanced at Edward's silhouette in the flickering light, wondering if I'd eventually do something reckless too, like quit my job or perform again. He glanced back at me, meeting my eyes as if reading my mind, then turned forward, pressing on. I followed. A muffled thunk reverberating from deeper ahead. My heart lurched. We both stopped, ears pricked, chain suddenly feeling heavier than ever. I raised an eyebrow at him. Cautious check or full speed ahead? I asked under my breath. He gave me that smooth, slanted grin. It looked like maybe in the past he'd been hit in the face or something because his mouth wasn't quite symmetrical as his teeth seemed a bit off center. Damn it if that grin didn't make me feel like I had all of his attention. He seemed to have all of life figured out when he said, full speed, obviously. I fake groaned. Figured. We pressed on. The tunnel opened to a small chamber dotted with crumbling columns and weird mechanical piping overhead. A half-broken arch blocked one exit while 3 other corridors branched out. The faint hum of steam drifted in from somewhere. I scanned the chamber for signs of life, nothing obvious. Water trickled off to the left, forming a stagnant pool. Edward's eyes flicked to the battered sign strapped to his back. If anything jumps at us, I'll whack it. I giggled and punched the air. Glad to see you have a plan. I think I might be able to do a little damage as well. He stepped carefully around a toppled column. My hoof knocked against a rusted gear, sending it rolling across the floor with a loud clang. I froze. For a second, it seemed like the echo alone would rouse something big and ugly from the shadows. Nothing came. Just my own ragged breathing. I hate this, I whispered. Edward shrugged. Could be worse. I spun on a whisper, shouting, How? He thought for a second. Could be the knee-deep rather than ankle-deep. Plus, there's always those sewer-dwelling goatmen or the crab people that could be munching on us. My gut tightened. Right. I hope those rumors were total myth. Another clang sounded in the distance, like metal scraping stone. We edged along the far side of the chamber, chain rattling with every step. The corridor to our left sloped downward, water rippling under a flickering old torchlight. That was weird. A lit torch meant someone, or something, had been here recently. We exchanged a glance. I mouthed, We go? He nodded. Without speaking, we crept forward. My breathing felt labored. I was sure anything down here could hear it. The slope led to a large metal door, half rusted shut. Faded lettering spelled out P-U-M something. He pressed his shoulder against the door and gave it way with a wrenching squeal. I braced for an ambush, but the chamber beyond was empty, just rows of old steam and gear-driven pumps leaking water and covered in rust. He whispered under his breath, Impressive. This must have been part of Riverend's old drainage system. I eyed a cluster of battered control levers. Think we can use any of this to flush ourselves out of the surface? Sounds terrifying. He poked a lever that snapped off in his hand. But maybe. Let's see. We stepped deeper in. He rummaged through a battered toolbox by one of the pumps while I tried reading the corroded signs. My office instincts itched to file a complaint about the poor labeling. A pipe overhead gurgled ominously. I was tense. These are definitely not up to code. They could blow at any moment. He shrugged. If it does, we'll just outrun the water. See? Plan B. Ugh. I've taken enough advanced statistics and hydrodynamics classes to know better. Then again, no matter how hopeless it felt, Edward wasn't panicking. It was like he refused to entertain the idea of failure. Oddly comforting, if a little reckless. Suddenly, a weird scraping sound echoed from behind a rusted pump. Edward and I whirled around in unison, the chains snapping taut. For a tense moment, I pictured a giant crab claw or a monstrous rat. The shape that emerged was far smaller, a half-rusted cat-sized mechanical spider, like a glowing mage tech automaton gone haywire. Its legs clicked on the wet floor, gears and dry pistons squeaking with every movement. The spider bot lurched towards us, single glowing eye flickering. I might have squeaked, but I also was prepared to launch kicks hard enough to crack ribs. Edward squared his shoulders, the battered sign raised, and he whispered almost inaudibly, I wish a spider would. But the spider bot froze after 2 steps, emitted a pathetic sputter of steam, and collapsed in a heap of metal limbs. It twitched once, then went still. We stared, breath caught in our throats. That's it? I asked, half laughing with relief. It's dead? Looks that way. Edward nudged it with his hoof. The loose gear spun off. Poor thing. I almost felt sorry for the contraption. Maybe we should keep moving before something bigger and more alive shows up. Agreed. He gestured to a door opposite the one we came through. Next corridor? I nodded. Next corridor. We resumed our trek, stepping around the defunct spider bot. At the door, I paused. Something about a faint draft tugged at my hair. Airflow, I muttered, pressing my free hand to the seam. Might lead to an exit. Edward brightened. Then let's open it. It took both of us heaving on the rusted handle, chain clanking, water sloshing, and a lot of cursing. Finally, the door creaked open, revealing a short passage slanting upward. My heart soared. Up is good. Maybe this was our ticket out. We followed the slope, tension clinging to my muscles. I was feeling the physical effects of the day's brutality. After a short climb, the passage flattened, and a tiny glimmer of moonlight peeked through the cracks in the ceiling. I could have cried. Yes, I hissed. We might actually see the street level again. Edward gave me a lopsided grin. Told you it could be worse. Before I could answer, the floor gave a soft crunch under my hoof. I froze. He froze. We both stared down at the rotten boards beneath us. My stomach dropped. The boards cracked further, trembling. Uh-oh, Edward muttered. We scrambled to move back, but it was too late. The wood shattered and we went plummeting. Our screams echoed off the crumbling shaft as we tumbled down, water and debris spraying around us. Edward tried to grab me, but the chain yanked our arms in opposite directions. The plunge seemed endless. Splash. I slammed into a cold pool, gasping as filthy water surged up my nose. My ears rang. The chain jerked again, tangling my front legs, but I kicked out, fighting to the surface. My mouth broke free of the water, and I coughed, searching for stable ground. Edward bobbed, sputtering. You okay? He managed, spitting water. I coughed, half floating in chest-deep gloom. Define okay, I croaked, hair plastered to my face. I tried not to think about what might be floating in this water. Where the hell are we? I blinked through the darkness. We'd fallen into some deeper cavern, the walls slick and featureless. At least there was a faint greenish glow from above. My whole body shook with adrenaline and pure disgust. Edward placed his strong hands under my sides and lifted me up, slightly steadying me. We'll climb out, he said firmly, scanning for a ledge. I'm sure of it. I nodded, breath shaky. No giving up, I reminded myself. Even if we were half drowned in an underground swamp, we just had to keep trying, because giving up wouldn't fix anything, and apparently Edward was allergic to quitting. Right, I whispered, forcing a grin. What's another setback? He smirked, water dripping off his horns. One more story we can laugh about later. Hell, I'm laughing about it already. I rolled my eyes, but I felt good. I believed him.
Chapter 8. Dancing to the bleed of your own drum. Edward Goth's POV. We crawled out of the flooded shaft, still chained together by a dwarven curse that felt heavier than the sodden clothes plastered to our bodies. Jessie flicked water off her horse flank, muttering about mold on her tail. I didn't blame her. At least the corridor we'd emerged from seemed drier. A plus, I guess. Great news. We've met our quota for falling through rotted floors. Yep, we don't need to do that anymore. We can check it off the to-do list. Speak for yourself, Jessie grumbled, tail flicking. To my knowledge, centaurs have yet to join any elite synchronized swimming communities. She scanned the new surroundings. Low tunnel, dripping pipes, a meager glow from fungus on the walls. So, should we hunker down or keep going? I glanced over my shoulder. We'd left behind the collapsing boards up above. Well, we can't climb back up that shaft without ropes or wings. I adjusted the battered sign strapped to my back. Forward's our only option. Full speed ahead. What a lovely place to spend our day. Next on the to-do list, get attacked by those rotten crab folk. Hey, I wish a sewer monster would try messing with us. I wish a fool would. She shot me an incredulous stare. Seriously? I shrugged, remembering something and deciding to share it. I was living in a rough area, East Martin Luther King Boulevard, with my brother, Hat. And Hat and I were sitting in a wagon, and this huge guy was walking up the side of the wagon. And my brother, he looked over to me and he said, I think that guy might be about to try and rob us, maybe take the wagon. I really never go long without remembering what he told me in that moment. He said he wished that fool would. Because my big brother, he was going to have the time of his life making sure that guy grows to deeply regret any decision to try and mess with me or mess with him. Permanent disfigurement, maybe eat one of his eyes, while the one still in his head watches in horror. Yep. He said that to me, and instead of me being scared for our safety, I felt strong and unafraid, and I repeated it. I wish a fool would. Back then, I knew me and my brother could take on anything and we'd win. And saying it makes me feel strong still. I wasn't looking at her, but she sighed and rubbed my back as we walked. It isn't a sad memory, and I've been doing it for so long I'd forgotten where I started doing it. Where I'd started saying that phrase. I wish a fool would. Jessie moved some busted crates off the path and mused. Yeah, it'd be nice if people could be all bad or all good. Then we wouldn't have to feel conflicted about things. Nope, keep things nice and orderly. If you decide you want to be a jerk to me, you'll have to file at least 3 forms and applications, Edward. In Jessie land, every bit of evil requires a permit. We chuckled together. Along the walls, rusting mechanical parts jutted out, leftovers of some ancient pumping system. Every so often, a hiss of steam startled us from a vent. The place had a heartbeat, dripping, ticking, croaking with old pipes, and apparently something else. Somewhere up ahead, I heard a wet stomping and changing noise. At first, I thought maybe it was water echoing weird, but no. It was a deadened bleeding. Now, we'd all heard rumors about goat folk living in the city's underbelly, but like Jesse, I assumed that was a fairy tale. Even so, hearing it for real set my nerves on edge. Jesse's ears shot forward. Goat folk. Great. That means horns, right? More horns than you. My horns are elegant. I wish a goat man would try because I'll gore a stack of the weirdos. Her eyes scanned the gloom. My cousin Paul told me that the goat folk in the sewers, they hold necromancer rituals in dank mycelium chambers. He also told me that their favorite food, it's deep-fried minotaur. Well, I won't be apologizing for being made of delicious grade A beef. Sure enough, the tunnel opened wide, low-ceilinged cavern. The faint glow of fungus revealed 8 or 9 bipedal goats in tan cargo shorts milling around crates and half-collapsed stone columns. One bigger goat, orc-sized with massive horns that curled around its ears, noticed us first, letting out a sharp bleat that rang off the walls. He sprinted over to a massive, easily 12-foot tall golden gong and swung hard to unleash its mighty gong sound. Instantly, the others turned our way and began screaming while forming a half circle that was rapidly closing around us. Gong! Gong! Ma! Ma! Jesse tensed. I did too. I had my battered sign, but these goats had horns and possibly hooves that could knock teeth out. And who knows what sort of evil magics are down here. Not to mention, we were still absolutely exhausted and tenderized from our last big fight. Oh well, here we go. A smaller goat hopped forward, eyeing the chain. Another came from the side, bleeding in quick bursts. "Ma, ma, ma, ma." I picked up scattered phrases, but it was mostly goat talk. Jessie cleared her throat. I took a Caprine sub-dialect class once. Don't ask why. Well, now's your moment, I guess. She let out a series of halting bleats and short hums. "Ma, ma, 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 ma." Well, the goat folk froze, pointed, tan and brown fur with mouths and ears twitching. I had no idea if Jesse was insulting their grandma or apologizing for existing, but they listened, glancing among themselves. The biggest goat, a head and horns shorter than Jesse, lowered its horns a fraction, not charging, which felt like progress. After a tense exchange, Jesse turned to me, voice low. They want to know why we're in their territory. I told them we're just cursed and fleeing some jerks after a misunderstanding. They are not sure they believe me yet. I exhaled. Better than immediate violence. Keep going. She bleated a response while tapping the chain and pointing to me, then to herself. A goat approached. The approaching goat had cargo shorts which seemed full to bursting with various sewer goat cargo, I assume. She also had a green tube top that seemed very well cared for and broken in. She began gently tapping the metal of our chains and bleated a sad note. "Ma," presumably pitying our predicament. The big goat snorted, stomped one hoof on the stone. The others parted, gesturing at a corridor behind them. Jesse guessed they wanted us to follow. We shared a look, then we followed behind the goat folk. My heart pounded with every step. But no one lunged or brandished weapons. No, we found ourselves making our way into an even bigger chamber. This one had rough platforms carved out of rock, forming tiers like bleachers. More goats lounged there, some weaving elaborate pastel multicolored cloth, and some were tending little fires or cooking pots. A pungent smell of old hay, goat hair, and stale water hung in the air, but it sure beats rotting sewage. Dozens of goat eyes locked in on us. Tense silence. Then the big goat from before bleated something in a commanding tone. "Ma!" A few smaller ones trotted our way, examining the chain, murmuring among themselves. Jesse tried more bleating. I felt like I caught some random words: apology, magic, accident, shackles. The goats responded by flicking their ears, seeming curious. Suddenly, a goat with a battered lute started strumming. The others, they started stomping their hooves in a simple rhythm. My eyebrows rose. Could it be a jam sesh? Jesse swallowed. They're testing us, Edward. Our lives may very well depend on what we do from here. I nodded gravely to Jesse. Understood. Oh, I understood the assignment. I ripped the red and black pirate joggers off my legs as the fabric shredded beneath my hands, revealing what lay underneath my shining, golden, form-fitting booty shorts. Dozens of goat folks snapped their attention my way in shocked awe. Jesse gasped as the pants ripped off. Edward, you've been wearing those the entire time? Ugh, I had to raise my voice over the increasingly loud music so she could hear me, but I leaned in close to shout. Correction, Jesse. I've been wearing these booty shorts for 3 years. I found them in the ruins of an ancient and abandoned party monastery. It was the Holy Order of the Sacred Snacks. They rested atop a nectarine and were encased in a holy magic protection field. Jesse, these shorts are a mighty powerful ancient relic. Jesse doubled over laughing, and damn if making her laugh didn't make me feel like the coolest minotaur in Riverbend, and maybe a few of the surrounding towns as well. A couple of younger goats bounded closer, bleating short phrases at me in syncopated bursts that echoed off the cavern walls. Jessie, still fumbling with her strange vowel sounds, tried to keep up, and they gently corrected her with some bleats and pantomimed tongue positions. High above, a row of older goats peered down, horns tilted in a regal hush. Then, as if our halting exchange finally satisfied them, the biggest goat slammed its staff. A rumble shook the cavern floor, like hidden clockwork thrusters coming to life. All around us, goat folk dropped their chores. Half-washed laundry fell in soggy clumps. Someone let a pot clatter mid-stir, and a cluster of goat kids abandoned their rummaging in a wicker crate. From somewhere in the shadows, a mechanical bass line kicked in, heavy, pounding beats, each thump magnified by the echoing stone. Boom, 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 boom. Over it, a reedy, high-pitched chorus of flutes wove a frenetic melody. Part marching band, part runaway tavern jam. Then the goats exploded into motion, stomping hooves in exaggerated arcs, wriggling and jostling in low stances like they were battling invisible forces. It looked as if they'd harnessed every joint in their goat bodies for a wild, jarring display. Half stomp, half swagger, with their arms pumping and their horns slashing in the air in rhythm. Steam vents hissed overhead, illuminating them in brief flashes of light. I knew it was time to act. I grabbed Jessie's hand. Now's our chance. I pulled her alongside me deep into the dancing circle. No way I'd let her feel like a wallflower with this much fun to be had. Suddenly, the two of us were in the middle of a pulsing throng, goat folk bouncing in unison, their hooves slamming on the ground with enough force to match the mechanical bass. A few older goats formed a ring, piping their frantic flute refrain, while the main crowd danced in pairs or small clusters, some locking arms for a rousing communal stomp that reminded me of festival routines in far-off desert kingdoms. I tugged Jessie close, half laughing and half shouting as we tried mimicking their footwork. Arms raised, shoulders rolling, stamping the ground in swirling patterns. The goats whooped in approval, horns bobbing to the thunderous beat. It wasn't graceful. It was chaotic, a vibrant, sweat-soaked collision of clangs and stomps as the goats danced with joyous abandon. We let the music pull us in, guided by the hammered metal drumline and the crazy flute chorus, lost in celebration that felt like a cross between a tinkerer's dream and a festival of pure hoof-thumping mania. That's when a wave of goat folk came forward with a bowl of some pungent stew. Jesse hesitated, but hunger won. We took a few spoonfuls. It tasted earthy with a strong, gamey undertone, but it wasn't foul. Other goat folks began holding their cups out to us, the ones they were drinking out of, and they'd hold it toward us, gesturing like they wanted us to also sip from their cups. I grabbed one, but made it a point not to spend too long investigating it, since they'd surely find that insulting. What I did glimpse before sipping was a sort of milky fermented brew. My first sip nearly made me gag, sour and pungent. The goats bleated happily at our reaction, like we were the peak of entertainment. The big goat hopped down from the platform, staff in hand, and circled around us, bleating a question. Jesse tried to respond in bleats, pointing at the chain again. The goat's eyes flicked with sympathy. Another wave of chatter from the crowd. Then they parted, revealing a short, older goat woman in a tattered cloak, leaning on a scuffed and misshapen staff. Her horns were smaller, hints of gray fur around her muzzle. She ambled up, expression calm. All the goats bowed, more or less. So did we, awkwardly. The chain rattled, nearly tangling our arms. The older goat woman studied us with a wry look, letting out a soft bleat as if she'd seen this 100 times. She beckoned us to follow. We ended up in a side alcove when we followed her. Based on the noise, we were getting further away from it, from the crowd. And there was a crowd of folks that were just quietly following us. Once we got to the alcove, she started rummaging through a cloth pouch, pulling out small crystals, old scraps of parchment with dwarven runes, plus a handful of random cogs. She set them on a flat rock, and Jesse's eyes widened. I see dwarven forging symbols. Maybe they know something about chain spells. The goat mage took Jesse's hand gently, tapping the chain on her wrist. She bleated a series of calm phrases, and Jesse listened, nodding. I caught references to spell, dwarf runes, binding tension. The goat woman rummaged in her bag, showing a particular white crystal with a crack running through it. She let out a sad bleat, then pointed to a dwarven sigil for release. Then the older goat mage ruffled her robes and bleated enthusiastically while pointing to the slimy, lumpy pouch Norrell had given us. You want this? I ventured. I handed her the pouch. She immediately started sniffing it, practically huffing it. The older goat mage then bleated at a rapid pace while enthusiastically mixing the ingredients she'd shown us. The cracked, pearly white stone glowed briefly as if its magic was being enhanced. Our chains glowed and we felt them vibrate. Jesse shouted, "Yes, here we go!" Then, nothing. Nothing. The chain remained. The goat mage shook her head and put a hand on each of our chests, and my stomach sank. Guess they couldn't free us after all. We lingered in that alcove, the goat mage rummaging for something else. Meanwhile, the younger goats offered us more drinks. I took a careful sip this time. Strong, sour, but it warmed my chest. Jessie coughed, though she forced a smile. The goats seemed to appreciate that we were trying not to offend them. At one point, Jessie cleared her throat. I remember something about goat folk applying for a city permit. Maybe a farmland expansion or a building renovation. They needed it for trade at the southwestern fields. If I mention that, maybe they'll help us back up to the surface? She turned to a smaller goat crowd, bleating an explanation about how she recognized them from city records. It sounded ridiculous. Someone in the party must have filed that permit with Quill and Ledger, though. The goats responded in excited bleats, obviously impressed she knew about their official Go a Co-op permit. The tension lowered further. Good move, Jesse. Time slid by as we partied, and they insisted we share stew, a second bowl of the sour brew, and eventually passed around a smoking herb. I hesitated. I prefer clarity of mind, but the goats insisted in a chorus of cheerful bleats and arms wrapped over shoulders. Jessie gave me a hesitant shrug, but took a puff. I followed her lead, and warmth filled my lungs, a mild buzz settling behind my eyes. I wasn't hammered, but I felt lighter, freed from the day's stress and my physical pain relieved. The goats whooped in approval. The older goat hopped onto the ledge, motioning us closer. She took another long draw from the herb pipe, letting out a contented sigh. Then, in a raspy and aged voice, the old goat woman said, words I could actually understand, You're allowed to not know who you are. And you can be something different if you like. The immensity of experienced consciousness is deafeningly sublime. I love it so much I could cry. She gave a small grin, her watery eyes shining. Jesse's jaw dropped. You speak common? A shrug, a short meh. Then the goat mage patted our shackled wrists. Thought it'd be funny to watch you flounder in goat words first. She hopped down, staff tapping the stone. Either way, we'll help you out of these tunnels. I'm sorry we couldn't resolve your chain bind. I really thought we had it with those lubricated, synergized goat tongues. Come, my people like a good farewell party. We followed her back to the main crowd, stepping carefully around the chain left behind. Cheers erupted, loud bleats echoing in the chamber. Some goats tried hugging us in a sort of goat human centaur minotaur group hug. We returned to the gesture awkwardly but earnestly. The big goat man from earlier patted us on the shoulders, and Jesse grinned, eyes bright. The goat mage guided us through a side tunnel, short but winding, until we reached a wide grate. A few strong goats kicked it open, revealing a slope that led up, up, up. Just as we crawled out, the torchlight gave way to a faint dawn light near the top. I realized it must be nearly daytime. The goat folk pointed up, urging us along, and we exchanged waves, said our goodbyes, and up we went, stepping into a quiet, deserted corner of the city's dock district. Soft water lapped on the river's edge. Buildings loomed overhead, but none of the guards were in sight. Jesse inhaled deeply, glanced at me. For a beat, we just stood there, letting the cool night air replace the dank sewer stench. I felt like we'd left an entire festival behind in the darkness, and the fresh air was a relief. Something I probably don't appreciate often enough. Although admittedly I was a little chilly, since I was still only wearing my golden shorts. Jessie casually walked towards the water's edge, and without saying anything, she motioned for me to follow her. Not that I had a choice, still being chain-bound. We sat and let our legs dangle, mine finishing in hooves, hers halfway equine. The chain forced us close, but after what we'd been through, we didn't notice. Being near her felt comforting, like we weren't alone in the madness. And for a moment, the only sounds were the soft lap of waves on stone, seagulls waking up, and the distant creak of a dock. It's beautiful, Jessie murmured, hugging her vest tighter. I nodded. It's weird to feel so grateful and content right now after the day and night we had, but here I am. She gave a quiet, tired little laugh. Here we are. She glanced at the chain. Still stuck, though. As if on cue, a gentle hum seemed to pulse through the links. A faint vibration, like the dwarven runes were responding to the night air or the calm hush we'd settled into. Edward, she whispered. A hairline crack glowed around the cuff, then parted with no fuss. The entire shackle popped open, sliding free to clank on the stone. My jaw dropped. Another soft click near my wrist, and the chain slid off me, too. Just like that. No flash, no big spark. The dwarven metal released its hold and settled uselessly onto the ground. We both stared at the limp links for a solid 3 seconds. Jaws dropped. Then Jessie let out a half-stunned giggle. Did we? Did it just? Looks that way. I rubbed the pink mark on my wrist where the cuff had been, feeling the sudden absence of that old burdensome weight. Jessie snorted in amazement, picking up a loose link. No flash, no fireworks. It just cracked itself open. Like magic. A wave of relief spread over me. My shoulders slackened, and we both laughed for a few moments, letting the sound echo over the water's rippling surface. A beat later, Jessie leaned in and kissed me. It lasted long enough for the rest of the world to fade. Rotted floors, dwarven curses, goat folk dancing, and when we broke apart, we sat there, tethered to nothing but each other's ridiculous swirl of experiences. Eventually, I rummaged in my pocket for my cracked speaking stone. Here, I said, tapping the half-glowing rune. My stone number. You know, if you want to call. She cocked an eyebrow, tail flicking in the faint breeze. Look at you handing out your stone number like you're some high society dandy. Let's do karaoke this weekend. Karaoke with a centaur might be my life's new ambition. But with our luck, who knows what'll happen. I never said I was done making trouble. We laughed, and for a moment it felt like we should say goodbye, but neither of us moved. Instead, Jessie perched at the dock's edge, letting her hooves dangle above the water. I followed, plopping down with a tired grunt. The chain, free from our arms, lay coiled on the stones behind us. A gull cawed overhead. The sky started to lighten from navy to a smoky lavender. We sat in silence, letting each breath calm the last of the adrenaline. The city's hush felt peaceful at this hour. No crab folk or goat illusions, just the gentle lap of the river tide. Jessie exhaled, leaning against my side. I always used to rush home after doing just about anything. Wanted to hide under blankets and pretend reality wasn't so chaotic or scary. But now, she looked at the gradual pink tinge on the horizon. Kind of like soaking it in. I nudged her shoulder. Same. Guess we can let ourselves breathe. Actually see the world, right? Her eyes drifted to a barge slowly rolling upstream, a few lanterns flickering along its deck. The soft thrum of its engine set the water dancing with golden reflections. Another ship followed in its wake, sails half furled, crew barely visible against the dawn. They looked so calm, like they had nowhere urgent to be, just existing in the gentle in-between of night and day. I half closed my eyes, reminded of the countless days I'd just meandered around the city, crafting and seeing potential, all while trying to make something special. Well, it certainly feels like Jessie and I have something special. She absently brushed a hand through my damp fur. Do you think after everything that we'll ever get to a place where a normal life is enough? I opened my eyes, looking at the gentle tides. Maybe we don't want normal, exactly. How about we aim for less curses and more dancing? And more karaoke, she added with a wry grin. Definitely. Maybe we sign up as a duo act, I teased, picturing Gnarl's inevitable cameo. There's money in novelty. We can settle for applause and free drinks. She shifted her weight so her flank rested firmly against me. In the sky, a wash of pale peach spread from the horizon, turning clouds into soft rose shapes. Another ship drifted in, lancers flicked off one by one as daylight grew. Seagulls circled overhead, piping hungry cries, and the city's first stirrings carried on the breeze the sounds of carts rolling, distant gates opening. We watched in comfortable silence, content to share the dawn a little longer. I felt light in a way I never had before, like I could walk away any time. But for now, I stayed, watching cargo vessels slip into the harbor, sunrise gilding their sails. Jessie smiled. Guess it's a new day. We're free, Edward. I squeezed her hand. We always were free, Jessie.
Epilogue. 6 months later. Jessie Morgan. I woke up to the sound of shattering porcelain. My bathroom door was half open, and there was a racket coming from my bathroom. Edward? I called, stepping inside. A muffled clang answered me, followed by a triumphant, I fixed your bidet, although your toilet is another story. Naturally, I expected to see him twisting pipes or maybe tightening valves. Instead, I found him standing over my smashed porcelain toilet, holding a sledgehammer. My mouth fell open. Edward, that's my toilet. He shrugged, a sheepish grin spreading across his muzzle. Sometimes you have to destroy something before you can fix it properly, Jesse. The old plumbing was shot. Don't worry, you'll get a brand new throne and obgesian holder to match your new upgraded bidet system. Aren't we due at your sculpture unveiling in, I checked the time, 40 minutes? He grabbed a towel to blot the water pooling on the tile. We'll be back quick, promise. Once the unveiling's done, I'll come back and install everything. Trust me, you'll thank me later. I could only gape at the wreckage, stifling a nervous laugh. Fine, but if I end up with an outhouse on my balcony, I'm blaming you. We hurried out of my apartment, trekking through the cramped alley outside. A morning drizzle had left the cobblestones slick, so I had to step carefully, my hooves sliding more than once. Edward steadied me with an arm. The habit of moving in sync still lingered. On the way, he asked, So, you still cutting your hours at Quill and Ledger? I nodded. Only part-time now. I need to focus on finding new clients. You're a great start, but the city has a tremendous number of public beautification grants that are sitting unbid because artists don't know how to file paperwork and bureaucrats aren't exactly bohemians. I shrugged, ignoring his mock offended look. I think you're going to have a lot more interest in your work after today. Plus, lowering my hours means more time for open mics. He chuckled. You're turning into quite the superstar. Don't forget about little Edward during your meteoric rise to the top. It's okay. I'll always need a hot piece of you-know-what around, I teased before playfully slapping Edward's shank and giving him a peck on the cheek. We reached the riverside clearing where Edward's massive sculpture stood, draped in a burgundy cloth. A small crowd milled about. Krog and her 2 orc companions sat on a bench, guarding several suspiciously smelly trays of food they brought. Edward smiled and looked at Krog's food. I think Gnarl told them this is a potluck. Gnarl perched on a corner of a bench, humming a tune that sounded vaguely like donkey braying. Who knows what he'd been up to, although he was mysteriously appointed to Mayor's advisory board. Maribel from my old ledger days waved at me, holding a clipboard. It felt surreal, seeing these unlikely friends all gathered for Edward's big moment. When Edward signaled to me, I stepped up to the makeshift podium. All right, folks, I began, voice carrying a mix of nerves and pride. Thanks for joining us. Thank you to the City Council for supporting our local artists, and welcome to the unveiling of Edward Goth's new contribution to the Riverbend Eastside Malcolm X Public Park Square. A few orcs hooted. Gnarl yelled wordlessly. Edward shook his head, trying not to laugh. He tugged the cloth aside, revealing an elegant towering metal lattice that spiraled upward like a testament to stubborn hope. The setting sun caught the polished arcs and painted them a brilliant orange. The crowd broke into applause, orcish whoops, and an excited squeak from Gnarl. I watched Edward's face light up with a grateful relief. Krog and her crew hauled their platter over, unveiling orcish delicacies that reeked in a way only orc cuisine can. We all tried not to gag. Still, their sincerity was touching, and Edward gave them a respectful nod. Maribel whispered something about how these beautification projects could transform the city. It all felt heartening. Then, from the water's edge came a splash and scrabbling claws. A momentary hush settled over the gathering. 3 crabfolk lurched onto the riverbank, shells dripping, pincers snapping with shrill clacks. They hissed, edging closer like they owned the place. Krog tensed, her companions immediately on their feet, blades half drawn. Gnarl hopped into Edward's shoulder, brandishing a miniature dagger and squeaking, Gnarl, unstoppable! I felt my pulse spike, the same frantic adrenaline as always. Edward glanced at me with that wry grin I'd grown to love. Acceptance that life in the city never stayed calm for long. Before we could utter another word, several hundred more crabfolk crawled out of the water. The unveiling crowd scattered to grab makeshift weapons or defend the sculpture, or just to get away. With a resigned laugh, I lifted the nearest blunt object, my old ledger clipboard, and braced myself. So much for a peaceful unveiling, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. In Riverbend, order and chaos always dance best when they dance together, and I'm just grateful to be invited to the party.
Epilogue, Part 2. Ben, Henry, and Melanie stood up from the kitchen table and put their character sheets and spell cards into various multicolored and neatly tabbed folders. Ben grinned as he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. And that's where we'll end our campaign. Ben excused himself and left for the restroom. Melanie and Henry shuffle some papers around. Seems like neither wants to leave. Henry pulls a palm-sized leather pouch from his backpack. Melanie, it's been great playing with you. Here's a little something for whenever you have a new party in Binghamton. I'm sure it won't take you long to find a new one. Chuckling and glancing away, Melanie grabs the pouch. Don't be a stranger, okay? They hug goodbye, and she gives Henry a small kiss on the cheek. And that's where we'll end our story for now.